Indeed, it was none other than the White Tiger Guild that went to assist the association during that event. Hey, Kaichiala, do you remember that dual dungeon incident 2 months ago? The one where our hunters had to go and take a look. Yes, Chief, I remember. What was the name of that survivor? You remember it. It's Xiang Jinwu, a ranky hunter. I knew it. He wasn't sure of it. But well, he was proven right once more. On Songmin instinctively realized it. There was something fishy going on here. Not once did his instincts that activated only in these sorts of situations let him down. Never. On Songmin shouted out an order to the rest of the employees in the 2nd division. Everyone, stop what you're doing, and get me every single data and information on the hunters Yu Jin-ho, ranked D, and Xiang Jinwu, ranked E. Right now, the responses from these excellent employees, when facing a dangerous situation regarding their own survival, simply exceeded one's imaginations. It wasn't for nothing that they were called the elites of all elites. Reports came in one after the other, fast. As it turned out, Yu Jin-ho didn't possess any particularly noteworthy background that required an immediate attention. Disregarding the fact that he was the 2nd son of Yujin Construction's owner, he could be described as ordinary, even. However, Xiang Jinwu was quite a different story altogether. Since the dual dungeon incident, he's been involved in 3 more incidents, and he walked away from all of them unscathed. When An Songmin spoke in a questioning tone of voice, Haiyan Kaichial quickly followed up. Not only that, he's a ranky hunter too, Chief. The first time Xiang Jinwu and Yu Jin-ho met was when the latter went for his very first raid. Only the 2 of them walked away alive. And now, these 2 had formed a raid team and were going around like a pair of madmen, clearing 2-3 dungeons in a single day. This definitely stinks. What could they possibly be doing in the dungeons? I wonder. Hold on, I remember now. There was a rumor about a really influential owner of a big company busy wooing S-ranked hunters in private doing the rounds, wasn't there? Could it be? A single puzzle piece fell to its place inside On Songmin's head. If his guess was right, then it made sense. This guy, he's definitely a reawakened hunter. A reawakened hunter, you say? Haiyan Kaichial's eyes became round dots resembling a rabbit's eyes. But On Songmin was sure of it. That's right, a ranky hunter was no different from a regular person. If there was an incident, then such hunters were as good as dead. However, this Xiang Jinwu kept surviving, totally unhurt to boot, from several large-scale incidents that killed most of the participating hunters. Of course, he could be lucky, sure. However, the 3rd and last incident. The situation with this particular incident caused by the agent of the monitoring division, Kong T-Sik, was rather different from the rest. The record said that a rank C mage combined strength with a rank B healer to defeat Kong T-Sik. Bullshit. Hunters in the monitoring division all specialize in combat. If Kong T-Sik wasn't a moron, he'd try to dispose of the highest ranked hunter with the low combat potential, the rank B healer, first. There was no physical evidence, but he was getting more and more sure of his guesses being right. Xiang Jinwu now possessed abilities matching that of a high-ranking hunter after going through a reawakening process. Yu Jin-ho coincidentally took part in the raid and saw the abilities of Xiang Jinwu. And now, Yu Jin-ho was testing out this and that in preparation to scout Xiang Jinwu to his father's new guild. When he thought like that, everything seemed to click. An Songmin picked up his coat hanging on the back of his chair and quickly put it on. Kaichiala, let's go. He also didn't forget to mobilize his right-hand man, of course. Pardon me, where are we going, Chief? What do you mean, where? We're going to scout a new talent, that's what. And you have to personally go to scout this new guy. Why not? Is there a law against doing that? An Songmin retorted and hurriedly left the office, causing Haiyan Kaichial to tilt his head this way and that, but still, he chased after the senior officer. Now this is so strange. It had been over 2 years since he became the vice chief, yet it was his first time seeing An Songmin personally go out on a job. Hi Young Nim, is there some other business you need to attend to later? No, not really. Why do you ask? I haven't seen you hurrying up this much with hunting before. Yu Jin-ho was feeling truly astonished today. He already knew very well that Jin-woo was strong, but today, he seemed to be on another dimension altogether. But that was par for the course, really. Jin-woo inwardly laughed out. Well, monsters in this dungeon were werewolves, after all, a title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. The buff given by the title Slaughterer of Wolves of course came into effect against the werewolves as well. How could the monsters from a rank C dungeon contend with him, when his level was already so high to begin with? Never mind the effect of that buff helping him out, too. Thanks to that, Yu Jinho had been kept real busy while trying to extract all those magic crystals from the dead monsters. He even had to drink 5 vials of the HP potion, too. He shook his head several times, complaining that he wouldn't be able to eat lunch now, after the potions filled him up completely. One couldn't find the addresses of hunters on the association's website. The only things appearing there were the names of hunters and their ranks. A hunter could provide the relevant information themselves, but Jin Woo didn't even leave behind his contact number there. But not only had this guy known his phone number, he was waiting near Jin Woo's home, so without a doubt, he must have gathered enough information before showing up here. Now that I think about it, he abruptly remembered something. I sensed a gaze on me earlier today, so I'm guessing that belonged to one of your people. The Hunters, the Reapers, the Night Order, the Shining Star, and then us, the White Tiger. I'm sure you've heard of these names before. On Songmin read off the names of the top 5 guilds in South Korea, one by one. On Songmin presented his business card. My name is On Songmin, and I'm in charge of the 2nd Division of the White Tiger Guild, one of the top 5 in the country. Our role is to scout talented hunters and manage them. If Seong Jinwoo was any other hunter, he'd have lowered his head 90 degrees before a business card was even brought out, and only then get to the main topic. Unless one was an S rank or an A. Pretty much all hunters dreamed of entering the White Tiger. Honestly, On Songmin was hoping for that kind of reaction as well. Unfortunately, Jinwoo was different, not showing much reaction at all. He calmly asked what he wanted to ask first. Why does an officer of the White Tiger Guild perform background checks on someone like me? On Songmin inwardly flinched. We wish to scout you, Mr. Seong Jinwoo. We promise to offer you double the amount of terms as offered by the Yujin Construction, no strings attached. On Songmin smiled deeply. Yujin Construction was still in the middle of testing Seong Jinwoo out. They are being stupid. The speed at which he could clear a rank C dungeon, the publicity value of a reawakened hunter, and the calmness he was displaying in the current situation, etc. No matter which side it was, there was no need to test this man out at all. There's no way that they have offered anything good, since they wouldn't have figured out what his true worth is. That was why On Songmin was confident of doubling whatever terms Yujin offered this man. No, he was confident of offering something even better. However, Jin Woo's stare became even colder. How did you find out about me? If Seong Jin Woo's voice actually had any physical weight, then that sentence would have crushed him to death, thought On Songmin. What is this? This incredible pressure. It was almost as if the other party was considering him as an enemy. Well, it was true that he had Jin Woo followed, and one-sidedly demanded to meet like this. From Jin Woo's perspective, it would be perfectly reasonable to consider On Songmin as his enemy. On Songmin hurriedly explained himself. It wasn't our original intention to pry into your private affairs. We received information that someone was clearing rank C dungeons in our district at an alarming rate, so we were investigating that. And that led us to find out about you, Seong Jinwoo Hunter Nim. The corners of Jin Woo's lips slowly arched up. On Songmin thought that was a sign of an incoming positive answer, and smiled along as well. Have you made up your mind? You promised to double the amount offered? Yes, that's correct. In that case, how much is the building the White Tiger calls home? On Songmin's face froze for a second there. Is he questioning the financial muscle of the White Tiger? But there was no need to get worked up here. Indeed, this was a great opportunity to advertise his guild. There was nothing to hide, and absolutely no reason why he couldn't talk, either. This was for the better, he thought. The estimated price is around 50 billion won. Also, although there are different businesses using the building aside from us, it still belongs to the White Tiger Guild. On Songmin proudly spoke. Can you hand over that building to me, then? I beg your pardon. On Songmin's eyes opened up real wide. He doubted his own hearing, so he asked back, can you explain what you mean by that? Jin Woo calmly explained himself. You see, Yujin has promised to hand over a building worth around 30 billion won. If the White Tiger's building is indeed around 50 billion, well, it's not exactly the double the price, but I can overlook such things. 30 billion. On Songmin couldn't close his slack jaw. Seong Jinwoo's career spanned 4 years. However, most of those were spent as a rank E, and it hadn't been long since he got noticed by someone. In other words, he must have gone through his reawakening process not too long ago. Yet, just how incredible was his ability that someone like Yu Myung Hwan, famous for his wily business smarts, promised the huge amount of 30 billion won. Could he be lying here? Because I won't be able to confirm if this is true or not. On Song-min narrowed his eyes, feeling suspicious. As if he had read On Song-min's thoughts, Jin-woo pulled out his phone and quickly dialed a number. That building you wanted to give to me. How much did you say it was? Well, the appraised value is around 30 billion won. But once it's finished and our guild starts occupying it, the value should rise up even higher. Hyun-min. On Song-min was now deeply mired in uncertainty and confusion. That is, I should say that such a big amount is, well beyond my ability to. If you just give me some time, I can speak to the higher-ups in the guild and then. Jin-woo abruptly cut him off. In that case, our discussion ends here. On Song-min became speechless. His head drooped slightly, as his head was quickly filled with the reason for this failure. In the end, we simply didn't have enough information. Being too hasty brought about this failure. After he picked up on the scent of this huge jackpot, he got too excited and forgot to move in a more cautious and prepared manner. If he had learned of what Yujin's offer was like, get the full backing of his guild, and go about his business step by step, then. For now, I need to report this to the guild master. I want to ask you about something. On Song-min raised his head. Jin-woo was no longer smiling. Gulp. Just as On Song-min swallowed some dry saliva, Jin-woo asked him a question with a low, heavy voice. How many people know about me? It's only me for the time being. I was too anxious to scout you, so I didn't even stop to report to my superiors yet. Actually, there was one more person. Hyun Kai-cheol. His subordinate but also his right-hand man. On Song-min concealed the presence of Hyun Kai-cheol for the time being. He was worried that Jin-woo might get real unhappy if he learned that there were two people instead of one. All the hair on his back stood up at once. Don't turn around. A cold voice came from his side. Jin-woo, who had been sitting across him until then, had vanished without making a sound and was now standing right next to him, still not visible to the naked eye. As stealth, cold sweat drops formed on Song-min's forehead. Could he be angry at me? Hunters were, in general, monsters. He knew this well, because he got to observe them from a close vantage point every single day. That was why he was always super respectful towards them. Did me spying on him and following him around cause an issue here? Should I have requested protection from the guild before coming here? I don't want to see the number of people who know about me increase. So, if I start hearing things about me, can I assume that it came from you, Chief On Sang-min, or your subordinate? It had been a while since Jin-woo stopped grabbing his shoulder, yet On Song-min felt like he was being crushed by the younger man's words. He's not putting on airs, either. Why did he feel this way? On Song-min was so sure of the fact that Jin-woo was fully capable of harming him. My gut instinct when evaluating people is almost always right. A thick strand of cold sweat rolled down the side of On Song-min's forehead. Who knew he could use stealth, excellent abilities, and even a rare skill, too. It was not for nothing that Yujin came up with an offer of 30 billion. They aren't ones to start a losing business deal. Indeed. I'll never talk about this matter ever again. I'll make sure that Kai-cheol, no, my subordinate, will keep his mouth shut as well. Keeping everything hush-hush was something On Song-min also wanted, too. Heck, he probably would have requested it himself first. An excellent hunter not affiliated with anyone. There was no reason to increase the competition by spreading the rumor around. I'll trust you, Chief On. With those words, the presence beside On Song-min disappeared completely. Chief, On Song-min's complexion was poor. Hyun Kai-cheol asked, his voice full of worry. What happened? Did it not work out with Seong Jin-woo? On Song-min's trembling hands managed to pull out a cigarette. While sliding it between his lips, he made his reply. Hey, Kai-cheol, I think we just ran into a far bigger jackpot than our initial estimates. He definitely had to scout that man. That was the only line of thought in his head. Thankfully, there was still a chance. Name, Seong Jin-woo. Level, 39. Class, None. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP, 7220. MP, 683. Tiredness, 0. Strength, 97. Stamina, 59. Agility, 97. Intelligence, 51. Perception, 81. Reduction in physical damage, 20%. Passive skills, LV, Max, Tenacity LV, 1. High-grade dagger technique LV, 1. Active skills, Dash LV, 2. Intimidation LV, 1. Vital points targeting LV, 1. Stealth LV, 1. Well, no wonder people are beginning to notice me. A strange message followed right after the familiar one. Required level. Having only heard this simple message, he couldn't figure out what was going on here. But by the time the following mechanical beep rang, Jin Woo ended up expending a huge amount of willpower just to calm his heart that beat so hard to the point of causing him pain. Class change quest. He was so focused on raising his levels and his stats that he had been forgetting all about a certain column in his status window. Indeed, that was the third column in his status window, the class, and now he was given an opportunity to replace that none with another word. He'd be given a class. In most video games, a character would receive many benefits after getting a class. It'd be no different with the system, since it operated almost the same as a game. His heart was beating harder and faster now, when he realized that he'd be one step closer to the goal of being strong after going through with this quest. He simply could not calm himself down anymore. Yes and no continued to flicker in front of his eyes. Jin Woo was about to choose yes and take on the quest to change his class. However, he stopped almost instinctively. No, hang on a sec. Who knew just what kind of a quest might show up here? Following right after the notice from his instincts, the warning bells from his brain rang true and clear inside his head. I'm inside a dungeon. A dungeon was one of the most dangerous places in the world. Even though he was fully accustomed to the rank C dungeons by now, a dungeon was still a dungeon after all. There was no reason for him to increase the risk even more. Besides, Yu Jinho was standing next to him as well. It wasn't as if he didn't trust the kid, no. Still, he didn't have any particular reason to let the kid in on the existence of the system, or explain the weird phenomenon that might occur when he changed his class. There was absolutely no one here. Only the dense forest greeted his searching eyes. In order to make sure he'd get to enjoy a relatively safe quest, he searched for a mountainside with almost no human presence and found the most suitable candidate. The current time was 1744. There shouldn't be any hikers in this in-between hour, plus his current location was an empty spot of land far removed from any hiking trails. Time to get started. Jin Woo accessed his mailbox. The message popped up in his view as if it had been patiently waiting for him. Yes, I'm taking it on. The moment he thought of taking on the quest, another message popped into his view. Generating a new dungeon. Before he had the chance to interpret what that message was saying, a change took place before him really fast. A black hole formed right in front of his eyes. That was merely the beginning, too. The black hole the size of a bean expanded to the size of a coin, then to that of a volleyball, and eventually, it grew large enough for a person to walk through. Isn't this? Jin Woo's eyes grew wider. He was expecting to see a new message with the contents of the quest pop up in front of his eyes. But this, what appeared before him was, without a doubt, a gate. To think, a gate would show up here. This one didn't seem any different from the others he was familiar with. Only that, it was a bit smaller than usual. This is no time to daydream. If he succeeded, then a new class and all the rewards that followed would be his. And if he failed, then he couldn't even tell what might happen to him. So, he needed to focus here. After taking a deep breath, Jin Woo held the poison fang of Kasaka in reverse grip and entered the gate. This isn't going to be easy, is it? Maybe because his class change was up for grabs, there were quite a few restrictions here to contend with. The most important one was that he couldn't replenish his spent energy or stamina, and couldn't heal himself using potions or level ups. The damage will stack, in other words. If he got injured, then that would spell his doom. The exit is blocked off, an unknown grade, impossible to heal himself, and no exit. This dungeon was a pretty risky proposition. If clearing this place was difficult because of all the restrictions, then didn't that also mean there was an amazing opportunity waiting for him at the end? He took one last glance behind him and slowly made his way forward, the torch lighting the way. Just how long did he walk? When he walked for a long time, he finally got to a bend in the passageway, and just beyond it, he sensed multiple presences. Clank, clank. Whenever this thing took a step, the metallic clang reverberated loudly in the passageway. The noises were getting closer. Jin Woo aimed for the side of its neck. Clang, but he got to hear metal hitting metal instead. The blade didn't go in. Metal armor. Jin Woo's eyes widened. Finally confirming the identity of his opponent, Jin Woo quickly took several steps back. It's a human. He was now facing a knight decked out fully in a suit of armor. Its face was hidden behind the helmet and he couldn't see what they looked like. Jin Woo called out to it while thinking to himself, could it be? However, the knight didn't even utter a word and simply lunged in Jin Woo's direction. He couldn't sense the beating heart that a normal person should possess, so, most likely, it was not a human. He was now facing off against a type of monster he'd never even heard of before. The first one to strike wins. Before the enemy made its move, Jin Woo dashed in first. Swish. Jin Woo evaded the hurried swing of the knight's longsword and stabbed his dagger at various points in its amour. Unfortunately, he couldn't damage it. The armor's too thick. Not only was it thick, the surface was smooth as well, so when he landed a straight blow, the blade didn't go in but simply slid off to the side. It was at this point that the knight swung its sword in a huge arc. Vital points targeting. Crack. The tip of the dagger penetrated past the armor. Did it work? However, it must have not suffered any damage, since it swung its sword down vertically with great force, not caring at all about the dagger stuck to its side. It's not really that strong, is it? That was his earnest assessment. Probably because of all that heavy armor, its movement was dull, and its attack pattern was also rather simple, too. Only that, its defense against bladed weapons was truly exceptional. Jinwoo rolled up his sleeves. Well, I've already fought against an enemy with thick armor that blades can't penetrate. The boss monster, Poison Fang Blue Kasaka, that broke a steel sword infused with magical energy in one hit. He had experienced killing such a snake before. Compared to the Kasaka, that thing is nothing. A thin smile slowly formed on Jinwoo's lips, since that was a pretty good memory to recall. Jinwoo easily evaded the knight's attack aimed at his shoulder, slid to its back, and caught it in a headlock. Crack. Along with a pretty sickening noise, the helmet was ripped off. This was the moment when his strength stat exceeding 100 points had begun shining ever so brightly. A simple but concise message announcing the end of the battle popped up. A flickering light indicating the presence of loot came from somewhere on the armor, but Jinwoo's attention was elsewhere. What the heck? There's nothing inside. The helmet he held in his hands was totally empty. He quickly checked inside the armor to make sure, but it was the same story, empty. Does that mean I was fighting against a suit of armor that was moving by itself? Just as he arrived at his conclusion, two more knights rushed into view from around the bend. It seemed that they had belatedly sensed the unfolding battle. The knights discovered Jinwoo, and as if they had made a prior arrangement, they unsheathed their long swords in unison. Jinwoo tossed the empty helmet away and loosened the muscles on his neck and shoulders. He now knew how to fight these things. So, this is the real beginning, huh? Jinwoo's lips formed a slight grin as he stared at the knights rushing towards him. His first step in clearing this dungeon proved to be on the right track. Was it because of all the restrictions? The loot drop rate turned out to be rather excellent. Jinwoo only defeated 3 knights, yet 2 of them dropped an item each. As far as percentages go, that was 66.6%. It was an unimaginably high drop rate compared to other instant dungeons. Rarity B. Type Armor. Reduction in physical damage, plus 7%. Jinwoo picked up the breastplate. As expected, a message regarding equipping the armor popped up in his view. The breastplate disappeared from the view. Jinwoo summoned the status window and confirmed his stats. So, it really went up. Jinwoo felt around his chest area. He couldn't feel anything weird. I got 30,000 gold in one go. Was it because knights were supposed to be wealthy or some such? He abruptly remembered that most humanoid-type monsters usually gave out more loot than any other types in video games. During the past 2 hours of hunting inside the dungeon, he met 4 different types of monsters: knights, mages, assassins, and archers. Is it stealth this time? An assassin type suddenly banished from his senses. Jinwoo didn't panic and extended his perception to its fullest, and soon enough picked up on the presence sneaking up on him from behind. Swish. The assassin received a fatal wound and turned into a wisp of black smoke before disappearing from his view with nary a scream. Jinwoo turned around to continue on his journey. But then, a flash of blinding light exploded right in front of his eyes. A mage had hidden itself and quietly completed a light magic spell. Kaboom. However, Jinwoo was already well behind the mage by the time that happened. Jinwoo didn't miss this opening and swung his dagger diagonally. The mage, too, turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared. I got hit by one of those way back when I got too careless. The thing was, he was already ready to react as soon as he began sensing mana gathering around in a single point. Jojiu H1's light magic. Jinwoo wasn't dumb enough to get hit by a similar magic to that dead guy's. This was one of the reasons why he thought that all these battles were like him studying and revisiting his past fights. That's not all, is it? In order to defeat different types of monsters, he needed different stats. For knights, it was strength. For assassins, perception. Archers, agility. And finally, for mages, it was stamina. The whole thing was set up in a way that if any of the corresponding stats weren't high enough, he'd have a real hard time trying to deal with the individual monsters. If his strength was lacking, then he wouldn't have been able to cause enough damage to the knights, and if his perception was too low, he'd have gone through hell in order to locate the assassins. Me raising stats evenly has really paid off dividends here. His intelligence stat was still on the low side, but all he had to do there was to economize his MP usage. Jinwoo summoned the canteen as soon as it showed up in his inventory and took several gulps. Phew, his fatigue was piling up noticeably now. Just how far am I supposed to go here? Could there be no end to this place? Jinwoo put the empty canteen down on the ground and placed his hands on his hips. It had been over 3 hours already since he entered this dungeon. Both his body and mind were getting fatigued now. Jinwoo sat down and leaned against the cave wall. The tiredness stat had sneaked up to a dangerous level, above 70. His body and mind would start to get negatively affected. He needed to take a short nap and decrease that stat right away. Jinwoo leaned his head against the wall. Sleepiness came over him almost instantly. However, he heard the sharp whistle of air parting ways. Time slowed down, and Jinwoo accurately snatched the flying arrow with his hand. Grab. Jinwoo's eyes opened up. He saw an archer knocking another arrow from some distance away. So, it's still too early to fall asleep, is it? Jinwoo summoned the poison fang of Kasaka once more and stood back up. Crunch. One single punch caused the knight's breastplate to crack and cave in. The lifeless monster slowly slid to the ground in between Jinwoo's stretched fist and the wall. Jinwoo looked down on his slightly skinned fist and clicked his tongue. Only a short break would have taken care of such a small wound by now. However, these abominable monsters didn't give him a moment to rest. Still, he earned quite a lot in the meantime. Gatekeeper's necklace, superior knight's breastplate, intermediate assassin's shoes, inferior archer's gloves, superior maid's ring. Other useful things he found along the way were now all safely tucked away in his inventory. It had been nicer if I found a weapon, though. Finally, the torchlight revealed the end of the road, and that end was blocked off by a huge castle gate. It was quite rare to see the boss room with a door like that. Naturally, he recalled the dual dungeon. No one was adequately prepared back then, and because of that, the losses incurred were great. However, it was different now. Jinwoo reached out and grasped the handles of the doors. The heavy-looking doors slid open rather smoothly, as if there was some sort of an unseen mechanism. Boom. The door to the boss room finally opened. As soon as he set foot on this floor, countless torches lining up the walls lit up all at once and illuminated the interior. As I thought, it's almost the same as back in that underground temple. Jinwoo maintained his vigilance. He scanned his vicinity and cautiously stepped forward. Several giant stone pillars stood erect to his left and right. At the far end of this room, he could see a tall throne. It's as if this place reminded him of the king's audience chamber from a fantasy movie. Of course, the scale was noticeably larger, though. A few steps later, the door issued a loud bang and closed shut behind him. Slam. Jinwoo glanced back, but he didn't panic. He already expected something like that to happen. Jinwoo swallowed his dry saliva. He only had to take one look at the creature's red name floating just above its head to know that the boss had finally made its entrance. It was a knight wearing a suit of blood-red armor. The way it was kitted out from head to toe in metal armor was similar to other knights he fought so far, but quite unlike those that looked dull and slow. This thing looked incredibly agile. What caught his eyes next was its helm. The red-colored mane extending rearwards from the top of the helm reminded him of a stallion's tail, and it left a rather deep impression. While he studied its helm, Jinwoo discovered one more difference between it and the other knights. This guy has eyes, but were they eyes or irises? Whatever the case may be, the pair of silvery lights oozed out from where one's eyes should be. They felt so cold and uncaring, utterly mechanical and lifeless. Jinwoo observed the movements of this egret while slowly raising his clenched fists. My dagger won't work on it anyway. What was needed in defeating a knight was blunt force. He needed strength to overwhelm him. Ygritte quietly observed Jinwoo for a while, before it abruptly took off its red cape. Plop, the cape fell to the floor. What's it doing? The beastard's strange actions didn't end there. It proceeded to take off the long sword on its hips, and the two daggers hidden behind its back, and dropped them all to the ground. Not only that, it showed them to him before dropping them one at a time. Clang, clang. The interior of the boss room had been quiet until then. The loud clangs of the metal hitting the stone tiles reverberated noisily throughout this vast chamber. Ygritte finished discarding all of its weapons, and as if to imitate Jinwoo, clenched its fists and got into a fighting stance. Jinwoo's eyes grew wider. Could this beastard be thinking of? Was this thing going to fight him barehanded because he was also barehanded? Jinwoo bit his lower lip. It's looking down on me. Come, perhaps reading his mind, Ygritte made a beeline towards him. The speed it produced was so fast that he found it hard to believe it was wearing a suit of armor. He raised both of his arms instinctively to guard himself, but the impact force still got transmitted to the rest of his body. Boom. His guard broke and his entire body became airborne. What? A shocked gasp escaped from his mouth, but soon it turned into a groan, because Ygritte had already appeared right in front of his eyes. Slam! The inside of his ears rang noisily. Jinwoo shook his head around a couple of times. Only then did the loud ringing die down somewhat. However, the much bigger problem than that was coming closer to him. His blurry sight captured Ygritte as it walked towards him. Jinwoo opened his eyes wider and got ready. Eventually, Ygritte arrived right before Jinwoo's nose. And so, a bloody dogfight erupted between the two. Ygritte didn't even try to dodge Jinwoo's punches. No, it simply took on the hits and counter-attacked right away. Pow! Ygritte's head was forced slightly to the side. But, even before Jinwoo could correct his posture, a sharp and accurate counterpunch flew at him. Jinwoo tottered about like a drunken man. What is this nonsensical bullshit? Currently, Jinwoo's physical damage reduction stat had exceeded 30%. However, each of Ygritte's attacks hurt like crazy, as if he was being pounded on by a hammer. On the other hand, his attacks almost didn't inflict any damage to the enemy. Their exchange didn't last for long afterwards. Flop! He tried to stand back up, but his legs didn't want to listen. Ygritte stood before Jinwoo, but stopped attacking him. It wordlessly stared down at him for a while. Then, while ignoring Jinwoo's question-filled gaze directed at it, Ygritte extended its hand out towards the sword discarded to the ground some distance away. Then, the sword was automatically reeled in. Ygritte grasped the sword in both of its hands and walked to the side of Jinwoo. "You want to execute me, is that it?" This beastard certainly lived up to its title as the captain of the knights. When it looked like Jinwoo wasn't going to resist his final moments, Ygritte went ahead with the execution. Of course, Jinwoo wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. The sword fell down in a straight line. However, Jinwoo reached up with his left hand and blocked the descending blade. The noise of metal hitting metal. The gauntlet he found just before entering here protected his hand. Flinch! He sensed Ygritte being taken back just now. The poison fang of Kasaka was summoned instantly into his hand, and Jinwoo stabbed the dagger in the creature's eye. A scream that couldn't have come from a human being exploded out. At the same time, a fierce light poured out from the eye with the dagger sticking out. Jinwoo hurriedly stood back up. Now what? Just damaging one eye wouldn't be able to determine the winner of this battle. He needed an attack even more powerful than that if he wanted to win. It was then a thought entered his mind. The horrifying attack that almost pushed him to the brink of death the other day. Jinwoo bent down and bear-hugged Ygritte's midriff. And then, he began running. Ygritte thrashed about in pain and managed to land several solid blows on Jinwoo's back. However, he gritted his teeth and didn't let Ygritte go. No, he increased his speed instead. He dashed towards the nearest wall with every ounce of energy he had. The impact force was great enough for the entire boss room to tremble momentarily. "I need to finish this." Jinwoo yanked the poison fang of Kasaka, still buried in its eye, loose. That caused Ygritte's body to quiver once. Jinwoo held the dagger in a reverse grip and stabbed hard at the beastard's neck. Vital points targeting. The attack failed to work. One more time. Vital points targeting. Sparks flew off from the tip of the dagger. A small nick formed on the metal covering the monster's neck. One more time. Vital points targeting. Clang. One more. Clang. One more. Clang. And finally, vital points targeting. The poison fang of Kasaka broke past the protective metal and dug deep into its neck. Jinwoo raised both of his hands up high into the sky. He took several steps back, before losing all strength in his legs and faltered to the floor. Jinwoo spat out the heavy breaths he'd been holding in until now. He won, somehow. It was an incredibly close fight. However, wasn't this the end of the quest? Jinwoo collected his breaths for a long time, before painfully raising his body up. He expected the class quest to end once he killed this guy, but not one message popped up in his view. He looked around, but he failed to spot anything different in the boss room. No, there was one thing that was different from before. Several strands of light began flickering on Ygritte's body, meaning his loot was now ready. For the time being, let's grab those. After all, he couldn't tell what else might happen here. Grabbing things that he could grab when there was a chance was the smartest move one could make, wasn't it? Jinwoo reached out towards those lights. Why were there so many? Jinwoo felt rather puzzled, but still, he couldn't hide his elation, either. The first thing to enter his inventory was the leather pouch. Jinwoo's eyes went extra round. The level of reward is on another scale altogether. It definitely was worth it, defeating it after going through so much crap. He wasn't expecting all that much to begin with, yet the leather pouch spat out an unbelievable amount of 1,500,000 gold. However, Jinwoo's attention was directed elsewhere at the moment. If the leather pouch he didn't even hold high hopes for managed to produce such wealth, then just how high was the value of the helm or the runestone? Rarity S. Type Armor. Reduction in physical damage plus 15%. Stamina plus 20. Strength plus 20. It's an S. Jinwoo cried out in elation. For the first time ever, an item with a rarity ranking of S showed up. Just the effect of 15% reduction in physical damage alone would have made it a top-tier item. Yet it even possessed two more remarkable additional attributes of raising the stamina and strength stats by 20 points each. Just seeing those options alone made his heart palpitate so much faster. The rarity items can't even compare to it. He was fully aware of the fact that he was standing in the middle of the dungeon's boss room, yet the smile on his face didn't want to go away. And if you were to add in one more unnecessary point here, he even liked the helm's design. It's a bit of a pity to hide this thing, though. The crimson helm that immediately reminded all onlookers of the flowing blood, and the mane connected to the helm itself, made him feel like he was holding an artistic masterpiece. It was only for a brief moment, but he even felt compelled to put on the full set of this armor if it existed somewhere. However, what a waste. Ygritte's other armor pieces weren't considered to be loot, as there were no lights coming off from them. Only the helm could be taken away. With the trace of excitement still lingering in his mind, Jinwoo shifted his gaze to the other two items. Two pieces of stones. Out of the two walnut-sized stones, the first one to grab his curious gaze was the immediate return stone. I know what is a rune stone, but just what could this immediate return stone do? His curiosity got resolved pretty quickly. However, the information on the immediate return stone floated up right away. Rarity, type, consumable. An item exclusive to this class change quest. When destroyed, you'll be transported outside the dungeon immediately. However, once the class change quest has been concluded, it will automatically be destroyed. Can't be stored in the inventory. The way to use it was similar to a rune stone. However, to think that its effect wasn't about absorbing a new skill, but to escape from this dungeon. Hang on a sec, the class change quest isn't over yet. Sure enough, the warning beep from the system went off in his head as if it was waiting for this moment. Son of a BTCH. So, this was the item to start the quest for real. He nearly fainted on the spot. He felt like he had stepped on something he shouldn't have in the first place. If I knew this might happen, I'd have taken a short break first. What would regret do for him now? No matter how much one relied on one's experience and knowledge to predict the future, one would never be able to correctly guess the tricks of fate. A strand of cold sweat dripped down from Jinwoo's forehead. Just as he swallowed a bit of dry spit and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down, the system's new message popped up in his view. Endure. Endure what exactly? He ended up shouting out loudly as his frustration mounted. For the first time ever, the system expressed emotion. Too bad. He had no time to stew inside his shock. The moment the timer hit 0, several gates began forming all around him. Not just one or two, either. He first spotted 6 around him. The number continued to climb up even higher, however. When the knights decked out in full armor formed silver-colored waves, the ground couldn't help but tremor from the weight. The momentum these things displayed would have been enough to overwhelm most people, but there was a smile floating up onto Jinwoo's lips instead. If it's these guys, I can definitely fight them. In a way, he was oh so glad to see them as his opponents. If the monsters coming out from the gates happened to be as strong as Ygritte, then he wouldn't even be able to last a couple of seconds. Stealth. Jinwoo used some part of the remaining MP and activated the skill Stealth. For the time being, I should observe what's happening here first. Jinwoo's form blurred and slowly disappeared. As expected, the knights rushing towards him all came to an abrupt halt. However, he spotted a mage that had just emerged from the gate chanting a spell. That's also when Jinwoo discovered an eye-like symbol floating above the head of the mage. The moment that eye flashed. In that moment, Jinwoo's stealth was cancelled. FCK. From the get-go, his calculation proved to be way off the mark. The knights that stood around like telephone poles snapped their heads all at once towards Jinwoo's direction. It was a scene straight out of a horror movie, and soon enough, the silver waves pounced on him. Jinwoo's eyes opened wider and he gritted his teeth. Boom. His punch blew away the head of the incoming knight. That guy died where it stood. Crazed lights shone in Jinwoo's eyes. Intimidation. The movements of the monsters became much duller through the effects of fear, but his mana fell down to 90 points. The intimidation required 100 MP in order to activate. He wouldn't be able to use it the second time. However, I just bought myself a minute, intending to use this precious minute to the best of his abilities as the monsters were noticeably weakened. Jinwoo began wailing on them with everything he had. With a terrifying momentum, he proceeded to utterly dismantle the knights. Too bad. The speed of him defeating knights was far inferior to the rate of the replacement knights popping out from the gates. Even in the midst of the maddened battle, Jinwoo sneaked a glance at the timer. It had only been 3 minutes and 19 seconds. If that was converted into points, how much would he get? Wouldn't it be fine for him to leave this place now? However, he didn't have any leeway to dwell on that matter. Even while he was thinking to himself, knights were continuously pouring out from the gates like unstoppable waves. He managed to destroy countless knights, yet he simply couldn't deal with so many of them. In the end, Jinwoo was buried in the sea of knights. His HP was in a freefall now, and eventually, it hit rock bottom. The time is 5 minutes and 8 seconds. He had endured enough, hadn't he? Let's get out of here. Now completely entrapped among the knights, Jinwoo flailed about helplessly in this silver prison and dug through his back pocket. However, the immediate return stone slipped out from his grasp and fell to the floor, and the roundish stone hit the soul of one of the knights and rolled away far from him. Jinwoo hurriedly reached out towards the stone, but the knights blocked him. Soon, knights piled up on top of him, too. It became almost impossible to breathe in an instant. His consciousness began to blur. Pow, pow. He continuously got struck by the knights while trapped below them, and as his mind began to grow dimmer, he thought he heard a snarky cackle coming from somewhere. The knights surrounding and pressing down on Jinwoo were suddenly all blown away. Even though he somehow managed to crawl out from death, his eyes were burning with life. As a matter of fact, his eyes were burning with a stubborn will and sheer malice. I won't let it end like this. He earned this opportunity after going through so much. So, how could he let it end like this? Never, because he was stuck at the very bottom for so long. He yearned to be on top more than anyone else. He knew the sorrow of the weak better than anyone. He tried everything to survive. And when he did survive, others kept pointing fingers at him. How will a Ranky be of any help here? The association is being way too much. They should have dispatched someone who could actually lend a bit of help. That Beastard, maybe he keeps surviving by hiding behind his colleagues every time. So, how could he simply watch and do nothing when a ladder that could take him to the very top was put in front of his eyes? I remember now, that voice ringing around his head just now. That voice belonged to those Beastards. The voice that always yapped on and on from behind his back. Fine, laugh all you want. I'll struggle on until the bitter end. It's fine if my HP drops to 10, no 1. I'll struggle and struggle on like crazy, right until the end. I'll fight until I won't be able to move anymore. Slam. 2 more knights were destroyed in the meantime. Unlike Jinwoo's unyielding stubbornness, though, his entire body was now riddled with all sorts of wounds. It progressively much harder to lift his arms. His weakened fist wasn't enough to stop the knights' tackles and charges anymore. From the front, one, from the back, another one. Slam. Jinwoo was sandwiched powerfully by the 2 knights slamming into him from the front and back, and he spat out a pained groan. Other knights pounced on him as if they didn't want to miss this chance. In the blink of an eye, Jinwoo was buried under the masses of knights and couldn't even lift a finger. Even during that, more knights continued to pile on top of Jinwoo. He was in a truly desperate situation. Even then, Jinwoo did not give up, though. No, not yet. I can still go on. Just as Jinwoo managed to clench the hand pointing at the sky, the mysterious countdown ticking down finally announced its conclusion. Penalty zone. He then remembered it. He didn't do the daily quest for today. He was planning on confirming the results of his constant leveling up, and to help him decide whether he was ready to tackle the demon's castle or not. Who could have guessed that things might unfold in this manner? Just like back in the hospital, everything began to violently shake. The knights piling on top of Jinwoo turned into figures of sand one by one. The world surrounding him was changing. Jinwoo soundlessly laughed to himself. For some reason, the words the system spoke to him before the beginning of the quest circled around inside his head. Was it trying to imply that the quest itself was unimaginably hard, to the point that he needed luck to complete it? Or was it implying that it'd cheer him on, as he resorted to borrowing the power of luck and earn a ton of advancement points that way? His fingers dug into the desert sand as the held-up breaths exploded out of his mouth. Fresh air entered and flowed into every corner of his body via his lungs. Finally, I feel alive. The sense of relief wrapped Jinwoo up tightly as he rolled onto his back. He was wondering why it was so difficult to move his body, but as it turned out, the DMN tiredness stat was over 90. This is probably my first time that stat has gone past 90, right? 2 words, buy and sell, popped up in the air. Although the layout of this store imparted not one hint of sincerity, no matter how kind he looked at it, he found it such a welcoming sight right now. He picked out the most expensive healing potion on sale. As soon as he confirmed the purchase, the glass bottle containing red liquid appeared on his wide-open palm. Jinwoo laboriously popped the cork open and poured the potion down his mouth. Just one bottle was enough to lower the tiredness value at a visible rate. However, for some reason, his HP value didn't change at all. Even after he finished the whole bottle, his HP didn't recover. It was such a noticeable contrast to his tiredness stat hitting 0. Why is it doing this? Only after he completely drained the bottle did he finally get to understand the reason for this anomaly. What a simple reason, that his remaining HP was too low. And sure, they should pop up right about now. And just as he expected, he sensed the presence of life forms beneath the surface. Jinwoo tightly shrunk his body for a second before springing up to his feet. His entire body felt as light as feather. His strength had returned in full thanks to the potion. The sand exploded up like a pillar and the huge centipede revealed itself. Everything matched up to his memories so far, and I found this thing so terrifying to look at back then, too. But now, he couldn't help feeling like he was looking at some video footage being played in slow motion. Jinwoo raised his eyes a bit higher, and he got to clearly confirm those red letters floating above the centipede's head. Its name was in red letters, the same color as the Cerberus from the demon's castle. It was then, the quest message appeared before his eyes. Please survive until the end of the time limit. Time limit, 4 hours. Remaining time, 4 hours 0 minutes 0 seconds. Confirming the details of the message, Jinwoo clenched his fist tightly. They can buy myself time with this, since he hadn't used the immediate return stone to escape from the dungeon. He still had a shot here. I'm pretty sure that, as soon as the penalty quest is over, I will be sent back to that place. What if time spent inside the penalty zone was acknowledged as the time he endured during the quest? His advancement points tally would be enormous. There was one issue he still had to resolve first, however, and that would be whether he could get out of this place unscathed with only 100 or so HP remaining. As it was impossible to heal himself using potions, he had to do his best to cautiously kill these centipedes until he leveled up. As the result of wrestling around with these centipedes for the past 4 hours, his level rose up 4 times and now it sat at 51. Before he knew it, the penalty quest was coming to an end. Jinwoo took a sweeping look around him. The corpses of centipedes filled up his view everywhere he looked. Thanks to them, he got to recover his HP back to full. It's a bit of waste that these things don't give any loot or gold. Well, it'd be strange that loot would come out when he was supposed to get punished in this place. He stopped worrying about that and got ready instead. Store. Humanoid-type monsters dropped the gold-containing leather pouch really often. And also, Ygritte also gave him 1.5 million gold in one go. So, he now had enough funds to spend. Jinwoo spent all that gold to buy one single weapon. As a matter of fact, there was this one dagger that caught his eye. Rarity B. Type dagger. Attack plus 75. A sharp and sturdy dagger designed to cut through the armor worn by the knights. The edges of the blade are shaped like the teeth of a saw blade, thus it won't slide off the armor's surface easily. Effect killing knights, plus 25% additional damage when attacking heavily armored opponents. It was a specially crafted weapon to deal with armor-wearing enemies, and it cost 2.8 million gold. He had to spend almost every gold he had in reserve to buy this weapon, but he didn't have any leeway to shed a tear over it. It's not like I can take the gold with me to the grave, anyway. He didn't hesitate and bought the dagger. Along with the Night Killer, Jinwoo also bought a roll of bandages. He held the dagger with a rather scary-looking saw blade-like cutting edge in his right hand, and wrapped them both tightly with the bandage. Swish, swish. When he swung the Night Killer around a couple of times, it felt like the dagger had become a part of his limb now. At a bare minimum, I shouldn't drop it accidentally. While he was putting away the leftover bandage into inventory, he spotted the rune stone from Ygritte. There was this thing, too. You can absorb the skill by breaking this rune stone. Right now, he needed to grasp at everything, even if that was a piece of straw. Whether that was an item or a skill, he needed to obtain whatever that could become his combat strength. Jinwoo didn't hesitate and broke the rune stone. Active skill. Required mana to activate, none. Even without touching, you can physically influence an object. As soon as he read that description, he recalled a certain scene. It was when Ygritte extended its hand towards its longsword that was discarded on the floor, far away. So, this is the skill that made the sword move back then. A skill that could move objects around from a distance with nothing but his will. On top of that, he didn't even have to spend any mana either. If I am able to move any object I see just like the description says, then this would be one hell of a skill to possess. Jinwoo immediately tried to experiment with the skill on the corpse of the centipede next to him. If he wanted to move something heavy, then it was likely that his proficiency with the skill had to be much higher. From here onwards, it's back to the class change quest. Inside that boss room, hundreds of monsters were waiting for his return. Or, the number could be even higher now. If he was being kind here, he was returning to that place, but truthfully, it was more like him being thrown back in there. HP, MP, tiredness, equipment, and even a new skill. And his renewed resolve. His current condition was so much better than when he first set foot in that place, but when he thought about going back there, he couldn't help but get tense and nervous. The knights all began rushing violently towards him. Where are the mages? Not too far from him, he spotted a lone mage. As I thought, what he witnessed back then was right. Indeed, he didn't see wrong. Back then, when he was being squeezed tight by the group of knights and only his arm could flail about helplessly, Jin Woo spotted something through the narrow gaps he couldn't quite understand at the time. And that was a mage continuously chanting a spell. A mage busy chanting a spell. At a casual glance, that wouldn't be something out of place. However, Jin Woo still felt a strong sense of discord from that. If that's the case, then how come? How come he saw not one single spell flying at him? Mages busy chanting but not casting any spells. Knights that apparently didn't give out any experience points. When he took these actions of the two separate groups that puzzled him so much and combined them into one singular puzzle, a new possibility formed in Jin Woo's head. It could be. It was possible that all of the knights there were fake. He sensed the mage panicking after spotting his approach, and its casting speed had increased. Suddenly, the knights no longer attacked him without a plan and tried to gather around the mage to protect it. With that, Jin Woo was convinced now. Stab. The mage soundlessly turned into a wisp of black smoke and disappeared from the view. And at the same time, hundreds of knights rushing in to attack Jin Woo all collapsed at the same time. It was as if they were puppets with their strings cut. The knights collapsed on the floor were now, more or less, empty suits of armor. This was my answer. Jin Woo cried out inwardly in elation. He had to go through several near-death situations just to get to this conclusion. Stealth. Jin Woo's form blurred in an instant. Of course, he wasn't trying to hide via stealth. What he was aiming for was. The ear-piercing mechanical beeps rang out from several directions. Jin Woo ran on top of the knights and quickly confirmed the positions of the eye-like symbols. There are a total of 5 mages. Jin Woo targeted the closest mage to him. The mage hurriedly gathered knights around it the moment Jin Woo turned to stare at it, but, swish, the poison fang of Kasaka flew out of his left hand in a straight line and stabbed accurately in the middle of the mage's forehead. Once more, hundreds of knights tumbled to the ground. He sneaked a glance towards the poison fang of Kasaka he hadn't recovered yet. It was time to use his new skill, Ruler's Reach. Jin Woo extended his left hand towards the dagger, and as if a magnet was pulling it in, the weapon flew back in. Yes, Jin Woo snatched the dagger off the air. Now that he didn't have to personally retrieve his dagger, he could take the most efficient route to his target. In the next second, he arrived before the next mage, and, even before the knights could try anything, he cut the beastard up in half. More knights collapsed again. The initiative was clearly with him now. Jin Woo's glare became harsher. There are 3 left. Perhaps sensing the threat, the remaining mages all gathered in one spot. It wasn't only them, either. The knights they controlled also gathered around them. And then, the mages all chanted a certain spell together. Their ominous and creepy voices reverberated throughout the boss room and soon, they finished their spell. The knights guarding the mages were suddenly pulled into one lump and got compressed as if they were thrown into an industrial crusher. And then, they were reborn as one huge metal golem which began glaring at Jin Woo right away. Wow, this is no joke, huh? Jin Woo leaked out a gasp of pure admiration after sensing the overwhelming pressure emitted from this giant monster. However, he wasn't scared by its appearance at all, perhaps because he had encountered several life or death situations already. He was feeling expectant rather than nervous. Jin Woo ducked lower and dodged the golem's fist. The stone pillar behind Jin Woo shattered into pieces after its metallic fist grazed it. Well, that is pretty serious power. Jin Woo grinned slyly. If he hadn't yet figured out what was going on here, he would have been racking his brain trying to figure out how to deal with this monster. However, there was no need for him to worry about that now. No need at all. Just as the golem locked its hands together and raised them high to smash down, Jin Woo didn't back away, but used his skill, dash, and pounced forward. And then, he slid on the floor. In the blink of an eye, he had slid in between the legs of the golem and shot right past it. While the lumbering golem was hastily turning around, Jin Woo had already arrived before the 3 completely defenseless mages, still busy chanting their spell. It was far easier to kill them off because they had gathered in one place. Jin Woo freely swung his daggers about, and the remaining 3 mages also became smoke and joined their already departed comrades. And the golem that was trying to hurriedly grab Jin Woo shattered into pieces of armor and scattered all over the place. Jinwoo didn't let his guard down, however. Is this the end? Or is there something more? He remained alert and ready just in case something else might happen. But then, the familiar beep went off in his head. Jinwoo swallowed his saliva, perhaps to laugh at his unnecessary worries. The system announced the end of the quest, instead. Only now could Jinwoo spit out a sigh of relief. He had endured for almost 4.5 hours, and that wasn't all. In a quest that could be cleared simply by enduring the combined assault of the countless enemies for a while, he actually managed to kill them all, just from wondering about how many points he got to accumulate and what kind of a class he'd earn from that. His heart began trembling in anticipation. Yup, that sounds good. If his past actions were used as the basis for the selection of his class, then the odds of him ending up with something weird and struggling in the future would be close to zero now. It was probably the most welcoming thing he'd heard in a while. He thought that this description was a bit too heartless and cold. But after looking back, he couldn't come up with anything to rebut those words. I only did those in order to raise my level, though. After entering an instant dungeon, he kept hunting monsters down until his level would not rise anymore. And while inside a regular dungeon, he made sure to find every single hidden monster there and slew them all, too. Also, although it wasn't his intention, he ended up fighting other hunters a couple of times, too. Assassin, corpses, and the scent of blood. No matter how you look at it, just as he suspected from the beginning, it seemed that his class would be set at assassin now. Nod. Jinwoo nodded his head in agreement with the system's assessment. Well, it's not like I had any trustworthy comrades to begin with. However, he couldn't understand why those points were being addressed during the selection of his class. The system's explanation continued on. The army of the deceased. Only now had Jinwoo realized something had gone awry here. Too bad, though. No, wait. Even before he had any chance to raise his objections, the system read off the result of the selection in its usual dry and humorless voice. What the FCK? What was the meaning of this sudden slap to the back of his head? Everything was going well, so why did Necromancer pop out instead of the expected assassin? Jinwoo dazedly stared at the message. He even rubbed his eyes several times, but nothing changed. The message still floated up there, unchanging. He couldn't believe it at first, then he became really angry next. I've never even touched the intelligence stat, so what the hell? Just how did he end up with a rare class not even found among countless mage-type hunters in the world? From the moment Jinwoo awoke as a ranky hunter, he was always a close-quarters fighter. With the exception of the steel longsword, he always used daggers, and the skills he got until now were perfectly suited for the role of an assassin. That was why he hadn't even thought of the possibility that his class would end up belonging to a different type altogether. It was a magic type, no less. No, more than that, a necromancer. His knowledge of different classes came from video games, but even then, he knew enough about what being a necromancer entailed. A gloomy-looking mage, and an army of undead following that dude. No matter how much he thought about it, that image just didn't correlate to him whatsoever. If you were to think about the advantages of being a necromancer, then, just as the system alluded to, he could create his own army. About that much. Well, the problem here is that army will consist of skeletons and rotting corpses. If you walked around with such an army, the whole world would be up in arms in no time. The system demanded his answer. What a relief that was. I can still say yes or no. Jinwoo spat out a sigh. If the class wasn't forced down his throat, then that meant there was another opportunity for him. If he still had another shot, then there was no reason to sweat so much right now. Jinwoo gladly refused the suggestion. No way. When he did that, the message asked him again. Although it was asking the same thing for the second time, he found himself unable to quickly answer back. He was now hesitating. A hidden class, is it? That term might sound like something straight out of a video game. But still, there were hunters with rare and strange abilities even in reality, such as hunters who could create shields or buff others, or even, the master of White Tiger Guild can apparently transform into a monster too, according to the rumors. All those hunters with rare and strange abilities were now enjoying a great deal of special treatment after being scouted by the biggest guilds out there. Could this hidden class thing be the same thing as the special abilities those hunters possess? If that were the case, this could be an opportunity instead. If I could only get to experience the class of Necromancer just for a bit, I wouldn't even need to weigh my options this much. However, would anything in this world be that easy? There was no way the matters of this world would revolve according to his wishes, and worse still, he had never heard of anyone possessing an ability similar to that of a necromancer. Oh, Jinwoo took a sweeping look at all the broken remnants of the knights strewn about this place. Those mages. One could say that those mages in the class change quest were using roughly the same ability as a necromancer. It was certainly very difficult to fight all those knights who attacked him with complete disregard for their own lives. If he failed to figure out how to fight them until the end, or if the mages possessed very high close quarters combat abilities, then the one lying on the floor right now would be me instead of these scrap metal bits. Jinwoo stopped looking at the knights and raised his head. A certain look of determination flashed by in his eyes. I already possessed the close quarters combat ability, meaning he was different from those mages. What if there was a mage possessing excellent hand-to-hand combat skills who also happened to command an army? Wouldn't that be the worst of all worst possible nightmares for his enemies? What if, something he could only think about but couldn't do, wouldn't it be possible for him to enter a dungeon rated B or higher alone and clear it now? Jinwoo silently swallowed his saliva. If he were allowed to continue raising his stat values after becoming a necromancer, then obviously, the army under his command would also grow even more powerful than before. He couldn't even begin to imagine the effect of that. It'll no longer be only me leveling up. His own army would be leveling up, too. Bonus points, it said. But that was rather obvious, wasn't it? Not sure how long was the expected time. But well, I did endure for quite a long time, didn't I? He began smirking in satisfaction. Then all of a sudden, several messages inundated his vision. What's this? His ears hurt from all the beepings, but Jinwoo's focus was fixed elsewhere and didn't care anymore. As a matter of fact, he couldn't even hear those beeps now. A special reward. Those words jumped right up at him. A reward. Not only that, it was special, too. Jinwoo stopped trying to store the night killer in his inventory and concentrated on the message. His stares were now firmly fixed on it. Soon, follow-up messages popped up. Shadow Sovereign. Hearing that strange term, Jinwoo hurriedly summoned his status window. Indeed, there was a new term added to his class column. It's not a necromancer anymore. The system definitely said that he'd be able to get a higher ranked version of his class according to the amount of advancement points he had earned. And also, it mentioned that the point tally had exceeded the limits of the class itself, too. The end result from all that was this Shadow Sovereign. So, is this the special reward the system was talking about? The thing was, though, Jinwoo couldn't continue on with what he wanted to say. Right in front of his disbelieving eyes, a truly bizarre and hard-to-explain phenomenon began unfolding. Behind the hologram-like messages, unknown black smoke was slowly and eerily leaking out from the knights strewn about on the floor like scrap metal. No such thing happened prior to him getting his class. Whenever his eyes landed on targets with black smoke oozing out from them, the words with hard-to-fathom meanings possible to perform extraction popped up into his view. Shadow extraction. He couldn't understand why, but to Jinwoo, those rising smokes looked like they were writhing in pain. As a matter of fact, it felt like they were reaching out to him, begging him to save them. Would it be strange if he said that? He could hear their screams, but he was sure of one thing. He was sure of him being able to free them from their pain. Shadow extraction. I gotta set a separate activation phrase for this skill. Jinwoo pondered for a bit, before muttering out almost instinctively, "Rise up." Thick, heavy moans resounded out from somewhere, and at the same time, the shadows of the fallen knights began wiggling as if they were still alive. Jinwoo scanned his surroundings once more. All the shadows found near him were beginning to move. Soon enough, a black hand rose up from one of the shadows. It pressed down on the ground hard, and slowly, the arm attached to it rose up. Oh my god. Jinwoo's eyes opened wider and wider. Those things were people. No, soldiers possessing the outer appearance of a person. Soldiers kitted out head to toe in jet black armor climbed out of the shadows one by one. This is my new skill. By the time Jinwoo recovered his wits, there were a couple dozen soldiers standing by his side, waiting. Tens of soldiers were now surrounding him. What the hell is this? Jinwoo approached the nearest soldier. At first glance, they look like people, don't they? However, they weren't people. He couldn't sense any signs of life from them. They didn't breathe, and there were no heartbeats he could hear. On top of this, Jinwoo swallowed down his shocked gasp. He sneaked a glance inside the helmet through the eye holes and found nothing but pure darkness in there. Jinwoo slowly took several steps back after feeling like he was being sucked in. These things came out from the shadows. He immediately checked his skill window. Just as the system informed him, new class-specific skills could be found there now. Active skills. Shadow Extraction LV. 1. Shadow Storage LV. 1. He checked the details of the first skill. Class-specific skill. Required mana to activate, none. Creates a shadow soldier by extracting mana from the recently deceased life form. The odds of extraction failure will rise higher depending on the target's original stat values, as well as the length of time since its death. Number of shadows that can be extracted, 30/30. Oops, a thought flashed by in Jin Woo's head. I shouldn't be wasting time like this. He had witnessed the power of his new skill. He could now turn the defeated monsters into his soldiers. If that was the case, then wasn't there a monster nearby that he just had to turn into his lackey right away? Jin Woo searched around as his glare became sharper. Found it. Jin Woo stood before Ygritte. It might have been a fearsome enemy that threatened to kill him only a few hours ago, but now it was probably the best ingredient he could find. Fortunately enough, he saw the black smoke slowly oozing out from Ygritte, just like how it was with other fallen knights. Jin Woo's expression brightened. Nice, he already knew the drill. Oh yeah, there was something like that, wasn't there? At the end of the skill's explanation, there was something he should have taken note of. The maximum number of extractions he could perform was 30, which meant the number of his soldiers was currently 30. As his eyes swept past the soldiers, their names and levels appeared before his view. Regular grade. Everyone possessed the same name and level. Oh well, their origins were exactly the same, so. But then, he discovered 3 somewhat different colored soldiers right at the back of the infantrymen. Are those? Unlike the regular infantrymen, these guys were wearing robes. Elite grade. Oh, he quickly figured out what they were. The 3 mages that were controlling the Iron Golem must have been revived as undeads as well when he gave out his Rise Up command just now. So, 27 infantrymen and 3 mages, This was why being rare was a good thing. He excluded the low-numbered mages and selected the closest infantryman from him to cancel the extraction. And he was really sorry about this. Extraction cancellation. The soldier turned into black smoke and scattered in the air. Not even a trace remained of it. Jin Woo gazed at the spot of the disappeared soldier for a little while with an apologetic expression, before shifting his attention back to Ygritte. His preparation was complete. He even had to sacrifice one of his wonderful soldiers just so he could turn Ygritte into a shadow. So, he simply had to see some results here. Time to act while the sun still shone. Jin Woo tried the extraction right away. Rise up. When he did that, the shadow cast beneath Ygritte began to wiggle as if it came to life. It was the same reaction as when he extracted the shadows from the knights just now. Okay, good. Jin Woo clenched his fists tightly. He had a good feeling about this. What would Ygritte look like after its extraction? Jin Woo's hands became slick with the sweat of anticipation. Unfortunately, ting, a mechanical beep akin to a metal plate breaking in half rang inside his head. Hearing that he still had more chances remaining, Jin Woo spat out a long sigh of relief. Hang on, now that I think about it, the skill's explanation definitely said that the odds of extraction failure would rise up depending on the target's stat values. But having experienced it personally, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. It felt like he got slapped in the back of his head. This taste of his first failure. Not only that, there was a restriction on the number of attempts he could try, too. Jin Woo attempted the extraction for the second time. Rise up. Too bad. His expectation was shot down grandly once more. Ting. This guy gave him so much trouble while it was still alive, and even in death, it was managing to give him some serious headaches. Jin Woo closed his eyes and reorganized his thoughts. Well, it could be nothing more than percentages and odds, but it was possible that his desire to possess Ygritte's shadow wasn't earnest or strong enough. Jin Woo slowly reopened his eyes. He sensed the black smoke rising up from Ygritte reaching out to him, pleading with him to save it. Jin Woo became a lot more serious than before, and he reached out with his right hand as if to grab that pleading hand of the smoke. Rise up. He didn't do it deliberately. He himself didn't quite realize it then. But Jin Woo's voice sounded much heavier and graver than ever before, and it reverberated throughout the boss room. It was then. A deep scream could be heard coming from somewhere, and chilling, eerie winds swept by the boss room. Isn't this it? Jin Woo's expression brightened. He remembered encountering a similar situation like this one before, back when his infantryman first popped out from the shadows. Just as he hoped for, as the lengthy scream came to an end, a long black hand emerged out from the shadow, and when that hand pressed down on the ground, a new message popped up in his view. Jin Woo let out a cry of happiness. Yes, he tightly clenched his fists. The taste of success was so much sweeter since he had to go through 2 failures to get here. However, the good news didn't end there. I succeeded in strengthening What? A shadow's starting level could be higher than 1. Jinwoo's eyes widened once more. Just as the message said, the Black Knight emerging from the shadow carried level 7 in its status. The message blinked as if to urge him on with the naming already. Jinwoo opened his mouth. Ygritte the cry. No, hang on a minute. When the system asked him to set the name, it meant that he'd have to use that name to call this guy from here onwards. So, didn't that also mean that he'd have to call it Ygritte the blah blah all the time from now on? Just thinking about that gave him a nasty case of goosebumps. That's way too cringy. In the end, he decided to shorten the name somewhat. Ygritte. That's right. As soon as Jinwoo spoke, the question marks on the guy's head disappeared and the name Ygritte appeared there. Night grade. All he did was to simply give it its original name. Yet Jinwoo still felt like he had accomplished something pretty amazing. He was filled with contentment, knowing that this guy was his loyal soldier now. My own loyal soldier, eh? Jinwoo took a look behind him. 29 shadow soldiers were still there, waiting for his orders. For now, the number was too small. Only 30, huh? Either this was because the skill level of shadow extraction was too low, or because his intelligence stat hadn't been raised high enough yet. But he was sure of one thing, and that was the number of his soldiers would gradually swell up. When he took a step outside, the surroundings changed in an instant, and he was back in the empty lot of the local mountainside. It was none other than the very spot where he initiated his class change quest. The time indicated was 5 in the morning. It was already time for the sunrise. Oops, Jinwoo clicked his tongue while confirming the time. If I knew the quest would end up taking this long to complete, I should have left a message for Jin-Ah earlier. What a relief then, that he'd often come home late from raids taking longer than expected, back when he was working for the association. Jinwoo took one last look behind him, but the gate he exited from just now was already gone without a trace. Huh? When looking at the spot where the gate used to be, it kind of felt like he had woken up from a long dream. Jinwoo slept until late in the day, but that couldn't be helped. By the time he got back home, the sun had risen up pretty high already. Jinwoo's sweet slumber was eventually disrupted by the ringtone from his smartphone. His hand fumbled around near his head and with some difficulty located his phone. Hello. His voice cracked up from his dry throat. Appa, you are still asleep. You know what time it is. Jin-Ah's shocked voice came out from the speaker. So, he asked her back. Okay, what time is it now? It's 2 in the afternoon. Eh? What? He glanced at the time on the phone screen with half-open eyes. She was telling the truth. Appa, you haven't forgotten that you're supposed to come to my school today, have you? Her voice sounded anxious. What time should I get there at the latest? Before 5. I won't be late, so don't worry. When you're near the school, give me a call first, okay? He didn't have a lot of time left if he were to get ready. Well, I'm going to meet my sister's homeroom teacher after all. Not only that, this teacher would be in charge of her 3rd year in high school, one of the most important periods in a person's life. So, I can't just wear whatever now, right? He opened the closet and rummaged through the clothes in there. However, he was greeted by a rather dusty, moldy odor. Of course, it was not something pleasant to smell at all. Jinwoo's frown deepened. He continued to dig around, but all he could find was an old business suit he wore once during his own high school graduation. Will it even fit me now? Been a while, but should I go on a shopping spree then? Before that, though, there was this small thing he had to confirm first. Actually, it was a bit bigger than that, but still. Jinwoo took off the old business suit and while sitting on the edge of the bed, summoned his status window. Stats. With that, a long board full of letters and numbers appeared before his eyes. Jinwoo could only chuckle wryly as his status window seemed to go on forever and ever. It was only a short while ago that there was nothing on this section over here. Indeed, there had been a time like that once. But now, just from looking at his skills and equipped items, his head grew fuzzy. Jinwoo lowered his gaze slightly while feeling rather pleased with himself. Then he spotted something else in the status window. Jinwoo checked out the hidden title's description, a title only given to those who have splendidly overcome their adversity. Your stat values will rise as your HP decreases. After reading the description, he thought that this title's effect would match up quite nicely with his passive, Tenacity. The title Slaughterer of Wolves was a wonderful title as well that would give him a 40% stats increase against any and all beast-type monsters. However, because there was a strict activation condition attached to it, he often had to do without receiving the stat buff. He got his number in the queue, waited for his turn, before eventually sitting down in front of a bank teller. Hello there. A female teller with a bob-cut hair reaching just below her ears and a refreshing smile asked him politely, "How may I be of service today? I'd like to see the amount currently in the bank account, please." "I understand. With a smile, the female teller took the bank book Jin-woo presented to her. The female teller got to confirm the amount resting in Jin-woo's account and her eyes shot open super wide. She checked the number of digits again, but without a doubt, it started from 1 billion. Not only that, he hadn't even accumulated this amount over a long period of time. For the past week or so, the records showed that over 100 million won had been deposited every single day. He looks so young, so how could he? The female teller asked him, her voice containing just a sliver of ulterior motive. Oh my goodness, may I ask, what you do for a living? Perhaps she herself was embarrassed by her own ulterior motive. The female bank teller's cheeks blushed softly as she cautiously studied Jin-woo's reactions. He replied as if it was nothing. I'm a hunter. The female teller slowly nodded her head almost instinctively. The popular rumor she heard was indeed true. I heard that hunters made lots of money, but to think it'd be on this level. All of a sudden, her life as a normal working-class employee came across as rather pathetic. Only until a minute ago, this man was a regular customer, just like everyone else. But now, Jin-woo looked like a person from another galaxy altogether. Our bank has launched brand new products and services especially catered for VIP customers such as yourself. Her smile was no longer the business one, but a real one, too. The female bank teller's gaze was now firmly fixed on Jin-woo. This product has proven really popular with our customers lately, so how about taking a closer look at the benefits it offers, sir? Too bad for her, Jin-woo refused right away. No, thank you, I'm fine. Is that so? The female bank teller's voice was thickly laden with regrets over missed chances. Now that he was done confirming his financial status, Jin-woo splurged on a nice-looking business suit at a department store. He still found himself with more than enough free time, so he stopped by a hair salon nearby and got a much-needed haircut as well. He had transformed into someone completely different compared to when leaving the apartment. This is why having money is way better than not having any. And they said that good clothes would become one's wings, too. Discovering her older brother belatedly, she gasped out in pure shock. Papa, Jin-ah's eyes became extra round like a rabbit's as she asked cautiously, Are you really Mr. Seong Jin-woo? Can't you recognize your own brother? Jin-ah swept her gaze all over Jin-woo with a stunned expression still etched on her face, her voice naturally rising higher. It's because you've changed so much, you know. What? So you wanted me to show up in my tracksuit and slippers when meeting your new homeroom teacher. Wow, Jin-ah still couldn't close her slack jaw. Hey, your chin might fall off at this rate. 5 years ago, Jin-woo too was a student in this very school. He already knew its layout like the back of his hand. Hello there, Teacher Nim. Yes, hello to you too. While on his way, Jin-woo greeted several teachers he ran into. All of them stopped in their tracks without exception, and took a look behind them at the departing back of Jin-woo. Who was that? Is he a graduate from this school? But there's no way I'd have forgotten about such an eye-catching student like that. Is he a new teacher? It wasn't only the teachers who were looking at him, though. Wow, he's good looking, isn't he? Who is he? Wait, isn't that Jin-ah next to him? He must be Jin-ah's appa. Wow, he's pretty cool. A well-built frame and a stylish business suit. Although his facial features were on the plain side, the synergy between those 2 points were powerful enough to attract the attention of the female students. Too bad, the guy in question wasn't interested at all, though. Jin-woo simply let the girl's whisperings slip in one ear and slide right out the other. The one to get really psyched up was Jin-ah, actually. She perked her ears up and listened to the assessment of her brother coming from the surroundings in a fit of happy giggles. Now that I think about it, Appa, you still haven't found a girlfriend yet, right? He also ignored this one. Should I, your trusty little sister, introduce you to a cute high school girl? And with that, Jin-woo began pinching her cheeks with an emotionless face. Stop being cute, okay, I'm so weak. Jin-woo eventually released her cheeks. Jin-ah rubbed her reddened cheeks and pouted unhappily. Walking while lightly bickering amongst each other, they had arrived at the destination already. Today is the teacher and parents only. I'm going back to my class as soon as you go inside. You having the night class today as well. NG, Appa, don't wait for me and go home first. Okay. Jin-woo sneak attacked her and rubbed her hair all out of shape. Study hard, okay. I'll see you later. Stop it. See you later at home. Jin-woo grinned and disappeared into the counseling office. Jin-ah's cheeks puffed up as she smoothed her hair, still treating me like a little kid. Of course, she didn't display any hint of disliking that. You must be Jin-ah's Appa. She was a middle-aged teacher with a wizened look about her. The overall impression she gave off was someone who could make other people feel better with a gentle and warm smile on her face. She perhaps knew his story, because she wasn't surprised in the slightest to see Jin Woo being here as Jin Ah's guardian. How do you do? I'm Jin Ah's homeroom teacher. I didn't quite expect Jin Ah to be hiding someone this cool as her brother, to be honest. Please, take a seat over here. She showed him to a chair. Jin Woo settled down on the opposite side to Jin Ah's homeroom teacher across a large desk. We can rest easy about Jin Ah now. They conversed for a while with typical topics that a homeroom teacher and parents would normally share, the atmosphere remaining cordial and rather cheery throughout the chat. Since Jin Ah was a model student, there was no reason for either Jin Woo or the teacher to raise their voices at each other. Are you aware that Jin Ah has set her sights on entering a medical school? Yes, I am. The lady teacher began reading the prepared information. Her scores in the mock test are excellent, and her regular grades are very good as well, so she should get in without too much problem. Still, please make sure that you don't pressure her too much at home. Jin Woo silently nodded his head. From the teacher's excited face, one could easily spy her high expectations of Jin Ah's future. Maybe 15 minutes had passed by. The meeting was coming to a smooth end. Well then, if that's all. Jin Woo studied the mood and was getting ready to leave. But then, the teacher cautiously spoke to him. I heard that you are a hunter. Suddenly, the teacher became quite serious. There was something going on here. Jin Woo immediately sensed it. Yes, I am. If Jin Ah is adjudged to be an awakened, will you let her do hunter's work as well? Never. He'd never allow her. Jin Woo decisively stated his position. There was no need to even reconsider this. Exactly as he had suspected, there was something here, and as proof, the teacher's expression became heavier still. If it's not too much trouble, may I ask you for a favor? Jin Woo nodded his head. One of my students is thinking of quitting school to become a hunter full-time after she went through the awakening process. She's not even coming to school anymore, as a matter of fact. Such things were fairly common. If she continues to miss school this way, then the management won't have any choice but to act, you see. Even if she wishes to become a hunter, wouldn't it be better if she at least graduated from a high school first? Jin Woo nodded his head in agreement. Can you help me persuade that child so she gets to graduate safe and sound? The teacher did her best to smile. Jin Woo was curious about one thing here. That student, what was her awakened rank? From what I hear, it's the lowest rank. In other words, a rank E. She won't get to live long, then. Jin Woo inwardly clicked his tongue. That was the rank where one had to be especially careful about entering a dungeon. If one entered with an overly hyped mindset and without much preparation to boot, then one would become a cripple or dead almost without an exception. Such a thing happening to a kid around the same age as his little sister was a sad thing. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, that choice was that girl's to make. No one could say otherwise. It was a rather lamentable thing indeed. But he didn't feel like taking time out of his busy schedule to interfere in someone else's life choices. When the girl's name came out from the teacher's mouth, Jin Woo realized that he couldn't easily get up from his spot now. Yup, the Republic of Korea was indeed a tiny place. Jin Woo became rather speechless. The female student who declared that she'd become a hunter, she was none other than the underage kid, the lone female in the raiding team Yu Jin Ho had assembled. The one that briefly caused Jin Woo to worry slightly since she was still so young and all. Is it okay to bring a child here? Han Song-yi. When he heard that name from Jin Ah's homeroom teacher, a flood of emotions briefly inundated him. So, he just had to confirm it for himself. And sure enough, the date Han Song-yi began missing school coincided with the day Yu Jin Ho's team began its raiding missions. With that, it kinda became a bit harder to think of this matter as someone else's mess. What's going on? Han Song-yi's eyes opened wider as she stared up at Jin Woo. And then, her expression became rather unimpressed. Wait, could it be that the hunter my teacher wanted to introduce me to was you? I don't know what my teacher told you, but I'm not interested in going back to school anymore. And I'm definitely not gonna give up being a hunter. Han Song-yi curtly stated her position. Jin Woo spoke to her in an even tone of voice. I wasn't planning to tell you to quit being a hunter. Han Song-yi's eyes widened further. I'm sorry, kids like her would always act completely opposite to what you tell them to do. So, he wasn't even planning to talk her out of it. No, all he had to was to show her what the reality was like, just once. That's what happened to me, anyway. He realized the truth after participating in his first raid. And that was, reality was far crueler and heartless than his imagination had been. Jin Woo took a step closer. Han Song-yi flinched noticeably and was about to retreat a step back, but upon realizing that such an action would make her look weak, she forcibly stopped her body from moving. Jin Woo now stood before Han Song-yi, although he didn't mean to, and no one would understand the meaning behind it. An ominous smile still found its way to Jin Woo's lips. "I'm here to mold you into a better hunter." There was no need to persuade her to accompany him to a dungeon. She said, "Okay, I'm coming." As soon as he told her that she now had an indelible opportunity to witness how the White Tiger Guild conducted its new recruit training exercise, she didn't even suspect that Jin Woo had any ulterior motives. As they walked to the van, Han Song-yi asked him how he knew her teacher, and he simply showed her the photo of him and Jin Ah stored on the phone. "You were Jin Ah's appa." Jin Woo drove Han Song-yi to the location where the White Tiger Guild was holding its evening training. The area they were in was designated as a location where gates frequently appeared. Almost no human beings dared to live around here anymore, so it was quite convenient to park the van. From what he heard, almost 80% of houses here were deserted. The story went that, once the remaining populace moved out, the whole district would be shut down. So this young woman is her. "Hello there." Han Song-yi lowered her head in greeting. While they were saying hellos in this fashion, a big muscular guy sauntered over and spoke in an irked tone of voice. "Let's stop with useless chatter and get started already. We didn't come here for a picnic, and it's almost 9 p.m. The muscular guy didn't even wait for the response and walked back towards the gate. Something didn't feel quite right with that guy, so Jin Woo asked Hyan Kai-cheol, "Who was that?" "Oh, he's one of our new recruit. He's ranked A, actually. He must be feeling a bit unhappy after I asked him for his understanding earlier. He even asked me if I thought that going to a dungeon was a fun pastime or some such. He's a rank A." Hyan Kai-cheol nodded his head, thinking that such a reaction was reasonable, coming from a proud rank A hunter like that guy. Jin Woo asked again, "What are the ranks of today's raid team members?" 1 rank A, 7 rank BS, and 4 rank CS, for the total of 12 members. A rank A and several BS, just for a rank C dungeon. Well, their ranks might be high, sure, but they are still newbies, you see. We're trying to help them earn first-hand experience inside an easier dungeon. Hyan Kai-cheol spoke with some pride in his voice. He then added quickly that after today, these guys would immediately be inserted into high-ranked dungeons. Jin Woo's expression subtly changed. The gate was rated at C. Compared to that, the members of the raiding team were simply too brilliant to the point that they were even blinding the onlookers with their auras. If the raid is too easy, the shock factor will lessen, though. That was what his main worry was about. But he slowly shook his head. No, wait. If she sees it with her own eyes, she should still be able to feel it. Feel how weak and powerless a rank E would become inside a dungeon. That alone would be sufficient. When can we enter? Still utterly oblivious to Jin Woo's real intentions, Han Song-yi began whining already. When Jin Woo took a look at her, her expression showed how pumped up she was. "Let's see how long you can keep that up." "Wait, hold up for a second, please." Hyan Kai-cheol sneaked a glance around him, and then whispered something to Jin Woo's ears. Excuse me, Seong Jin Woo Hunter Nim. If you decide to step in, today's raid will become too easy, so please, refrain from doing anything in there. Please." Since Jin Woo's purpose today was to simply observe, obviously he wouldn't enter the fray. "I won't step in." And so, Jin Woo and Han Song-yi approached the gate. Unlike that rank A hunter, there were some people who welcomed the duo rather happily. "Hello, nice to meet you." Since they weren't here to make money, the higher the head count, the better it would be for everyone. As it was customary, they introduced each other. But when it was the turn of the rank A hunter, "I don't care." He simply walked inside the gate. Before Han Song-yi entered, she turned her head to look at Jin Woo. "What about you?" Jin Woo crossed his arms and replied to her, "After I see you enter first." Han Song-yi's face was stiff with nervousness, but she still resolutely nodded her head and jumped into the gate. Jin Woo took a quick breath and stood before the gate. The surface of the gate continued to ripple softly non-stop. But shouldn't the surface return to being a solid black barrier once a person goes through it? Right now, it was continuously rippling about like the surface of water. Something was off here. Could this be? Jin Woo quickly spun his head around and met Hyan Kai-cheol's gaze. At this point, even Hyan Kai-cheol had sensed something was very wrong. Jin Woo loudly shouted at him, "Call your main raid team. Hurry." As soon as he finished shouting, Jin Woo was automatically sucked into the gate. The gate's surface, it's changing to a red color, as if a drop of blood had fallen in it. The surface of the once black gate was now slowly changing to the crimson red color. "Chief, it's the red gate. The gate our people just walked into changed to a red gate." "What? What are you talking about? How can a rank C change to a FC King red gate?" Hyan Kai-cheol raised his head and stared at the gate, now dyed completely in the color of blood. The ripples on the surface had stopped now, too. Hyan Kai-cheol nervously swallowed his dried saliva. "I don't know how, but but it's definitely a red gate, Chief. It really is a red gate. Baek Yun-ho's own complexion hardened instantly after checking out the gate's color. What was a red gate? It was a terrifying phenomenon where the dungeon beyond it would actually connect to a whole new world, not some underground cavern. And in order to escape from it, either you had to kill the boss of the area, or wait for the dungeon break to occur. In other words, once you stepped inside, it'd be the end. Once the gate changed its color to red, all external influences would be completely cut off. Escaping from it and trying to enter it, both of these activities were now impossible. I thought this was supposed to be a rank C gate. Sir, it was a rank C. Did you call the association to confirm it? Yes, sir. However, the association is insisting that it's still a rank C gate. Those goddamn sons of BTChes. Baek Yun-ho angrily cussed out. A red gate would only occur when the dungeon itself was ranked very high, to begin with. There was a whole new world on the other side of the gate, yet the leaking magical energy only equaled that of a rank C dungeon. That crap wouldn't fly anywhere. Even from a casual glance, he could tell this thing should have been ranked B at the bare minimum. If unlucky, rank or worse, something even higher than that. However, the only reason why the association still had the audacity to insist they were not wrong. Sir, should we use our own equipment to measure the magic energy? When Hyan Kaichial asked him, Baek Yun-ho shook his head. No magic energy leaks out from a red gate, so it's impossible to measure it now. There was no concrete way to find out what the problematic gate's actual rank was at this point in time. And besides, the rank of this DMN gate wasn't important anymore. How many of our people went in there? Total of 12, sir. How many are high-ranked hunters? As the leader, rank a Kim Chial Hunter Nim. And there are also 7 rank B hunters as well. 1 rank A and 7 rank BS. The new recruits, will they be alright? Baek Yun-ho slowly shook his head. If lucky, the rank A and 2, 3 rank BS might make out alive. Only if those trapped inside enjoy Lady Luck's blessing. That was how lacking these numbers were. With the current composition of the raid team, they should only be enough to barely conquer the weakest of rank B dungeons. Anything tougher than that, and you'd be asking for way too much. Without some kind of a miracle, the odds of their new recruits returning alive was as good as none. Baek Yun-ho's complexion darkened even further. Hyan Kaichial studied the mood of his boss and cautiously opened his mouth. Sir, actually, there was someone else who also entered the gate along with our recruits. Baek Yun-ho shifted his gaze to his subordinate, his expression changing slightly. Could it be that a high-ranking hunter was in the vicinity and entered along with the team after getting curious about the training process? What else could qualify as a miracle? He's the hunter I've been trying to scout for the last few days, sir. Are you saying that the hunter you've been keeping an eye on is in there, too? Is that it? Yes, sir. Chifon's instincts were almost always never wrong. What if a spark of hope was lit in Baek Yun-ho's heart? What is his rank? Is it I? Or maybe a B? If this hunter was ranked S, then Baek Yun-ho would have known the identity of this mystery hunter. There were less than 10 rank S hunters in the whole of South Korea, after all. However, On Song-min was shaking his head. Oh my god. Baek Yun-ho's hardened face finally brightened up considerably. Are you saying that a rank S hunter also went in there? On Song-min calmly replied. No, sir. He's a rank E. Almost right away. Baek Yun-ho's expression crumpled to a man who accidentally chewed on bugs. Jin-woo couldn't help but get flustered here. Could this be the gate that supposedly takes you to another world? It'd be his first time experiencing one, but he had read all about it online, from the testimonies of those who managed to survive it. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in the middle of a wintry forest, completely covered in white snow. What is this place? This doesn't look like the interior of a dungeon, does it? Hey, look. The gates disappeared, too. Other hunters were looking around in confusion, unable to hide their panic as well. While they were getting more and more flustered, Jin-woo calmed himself down, narrowed his eyes, and scanned the surrounding area. I don't sense anything suspicious. Thanks to the system repeatedly sending him to weird places, Jin-woo had gotten used to being in an unexpected foreign environment, which also meant that he could gain his calmness quickly. Han Song-yi had approached him and began tugging at his clothes in the meantime. Excuse me, something bad happened just now, right? She looked really scared. Her previous self-confidence was nowhere to be found. But then, Jin-woo's hand suddenly shot out towards Han Song-yi's face. Han Song-yi's eyes opened super wide. The arrow caught in Jin-woo's hand trembled continuously as if it lamented missing its target. And that would be the middle of Han Song-yi's forehead. Finally realizing what just happened, her face paled in an instant. However, the expected scream came from somewhere else. A male hunter fell to the snowy ground with blood bubbling out of his mouth, an arrow lodged deep in his temple. The snowy ground was soon dyed in his blood. Hunters began gasping out in shock. 2 arrows flew in at the same time, one aimed at Han Song-yi, while the other one hit its mark. Because of that, though, no one saw Jin Woo catching the other arrow. Over there, it's those beastards. One of the rank B hunters pointed towards the top of a tree located far away. But, even before he had begun pointing his finger, both the gazes of Jin Woo and Kim Cheol were fixed there. They could see 2 life forms standing over there on the snow-covered branches. 2 people. No, I should say 2 creatures. Long white hair, icy white skin, and silver eyes, and the race-specific trait of pointy ears. These monsters were famed for their particularly beautiful countenances, as well as for their rarity, as they could only be encountered in high-ranked dungeons. Ice elves, also known as white phantoms. Those who had never encountered one referred to them as ice elves, but the hunters who did encounter them and fought with them all took to calling them white phantoms instead, while also adding that a pretty name like elf shouldn't be mixed together with these abominable creatures. Jin Woo could immediately guess why the hunters before him all gnashed their teeth at the mere mention of the white phantoms. They are laughing at us, huh? The 2 archers have lowered their bows and disgusting smiles were clearly visible on their faces. It was as if they were staring at a table full of delicacies and couldn't decide which one to start eating. And you decided on this, huh? Jin Woo's eyes narrowed to a slit. 1 arrow to the far left, and another one to the far right. That was no coincidence. The hunter with an arrow stuck in his head was a 30-something who had gone through the awakening process only recently. With the exception of Han Song-yi, he'd be the weakest of the group. As for the other arrow, it was aimed at Han Song-yi. Indeed, the arrows were meant for the 2 weakest members of the team. If it weren't for the system, I'd be the one with an arrow stuck in my head instead. He raised the caught arrow so the creatures could see, and broke it in half. Crack, perhaps taking that as a challenge. The white phantom who shot that arrow pointed at Jin Woo and drew a line under his chin. Seeing that, Jin Woo simply smirked. However, his eyes were definitely not laughing. I'll kill you with my own hands. Receiving the trivial provocation of the monster, Jin Woo simply glared coldly as his reply. Soon, the pair of white phantoms disappeared below the tree. Looks like this is their way of welcoming us. Finally, Kim Cheol opened his mouth. The lone rank of the group opened his mouth, prompting everyone to focus their gazes on him as if they had made an agreement prior to coming here. Actually, he was the leader of this raid team, so that might have been it, though. I'm sure some of you have realized it by now. This is inside the red gate. Kim Cheol spoke as if it was the most obvious thing in the whole world. Of course, no one complained about that, which means no one will be able to enter here after us, until either we all die, or there is a dungeon break. The group all gasped out softly. The fact that they could no longer hope for a rescue came across as a big mental shock. Meanwhile, Kim Cheol continued on. If we remain here, we'll all die from this freezing cold, or from those beastards ambushing us. However, I'm going to clear this place and get out of here by myself if necessary. Are there any of you who wish to join me? Kim Cheol's powerful, confident stare and his broad shoulders imparted a certain sense of trust. Hunters glanced at each other for a bit, before unanimously voicing their desire to travel together with him. Let us move together. I'd like to join you. Let's go back together alive. I want to help too. However, Kim Cheol shoved away the chest of the male hunter who said he wanted to help. Even though he controlled his physical strength, at the end of the day, he was still a rank of the male hunter retreated several steps back. A deep frown etched on his face from the immense pain coming from his chest. Excluding you, excuse me, and also you, and you. Kim Cheol pointed to a few more others, not just that male hunter. Of course, both Jin Woo and Han Song-yi were included in that. It was here that Jin Woo's own forehead creased up ever so slightly. All in all, 5 people in total. They were all either rank C or lower. It's unfortunate, but I won't be taking you along. What did you say? Do you know anything about red gates? The male hunter shook his head at Kim Cheol's question. In here, 1 day equates to 1 hour outside. The worst case scenario, it'll take several months for the dungeon break to occur, or I kill the boss. Under that kind of situation, I can't walk around with baggage like you. We're baggage to you. The hunters who were pointed out by Kim Cheol got all riled up. But once the rank a hunter glared at them, they all shut their mouths close. Kim Cheol continued on, now sounding as if he was being considerate and all. Don't feel too bad, however. If all of you manage to survive until we kill the boss, then all of you will go back home alive, too. Even still, the singled-out hunters sent out desperate, pleading stares to the hunters near Kim Cheol, but not a single one stepped forward. No, they were far too busy avoiding meeting the gazes. It was then, excuse me, a rank B female hunter from Kim Cheol's group raised her hand. Kim Chiol turned to look at her, and she pointed at Jin Woo. It's fine to go over there from here, right? Do what you want. She didn't even look back once and walked straight to Jin Woo's side. Kim Chiol alternated his gaze between the woman and Jin Woo and smirked derisively, before declaring out loudly, "We've got an opening this side, so I'll accept one more person." Me. The male hunter who got shoved away by Kim Chiol just now hurriedly ran over, fearing that the lone ranka in the group, and the leader, might change his mind. Jin Woo stared at the woman now standing next to him with a puzzled expression on his face. Her gaze met with Jin Woo's, and she whispered in a low voice so no one else could hear. That man Kim Chiol, well, he couldn't see the arrow flying in, you see. Even if one was a high-ranked hunter, there was no way every stat of his would be developed equally. For instance, he might be a rank A, but his agility could be low. Jin Woo knew how stats worked, so he didn't think too much about that. So, what are you saying? Then, the woman smiled refreshingly. I'm guessing you're not a ranky, am I right? Baek Yun-ho's expression remained gloomy. On Song-min provided a short summary on who Seong Jin Woo was, but his anxiety level hadn't decreased by one bit. In the end, that's all speculation, isn't it? Yes, sir, you're right. On Song-min readily accepted that assessment. It was true that he didn't know anything about Seong Jin Woo, after all. But, if the boss checked Hunter Seong Jin Woo out with his own eyes, he'd have changed his mind right away. There was something different about Seong Jin Woo, and the fact that he couldn't adequately describe that with words frustrated On Song-min to no end. Baek Yun-ho's gaze shifted back to the red gate. In the end, the only person I can believe in is Kim Chiol. It was then, sir. There won't be any problems with Hunter Kim Chiol, I assure you. It was Ju Seong-chan, chief of the 1st Division of the White Tiger Guild. He scanned the three people in front and spoke in a proud voice. I've been training Hunter Kim Chiol quite strictly, so he could be ready for all contingencies. Originally, the initial training of new recruits was left to the 2nd Division, but the 1st Division would be in charge of the awakened ranked or higher. Those promising individuals who were scheduled to enter the ranks of the main combat force soon got to enjoy a different starting point from everyone else. Seeing Ju Seong-chan's confidence, Baek Yun-ho's expression softened slightly. How were Hunter Kim Chiol's grades? They are excellent, sir. Just his combat capabilities alone, he'd not fall behind anyone from the current members of the guild's main combat force. Is that so? A smile managed to return to Baek Yun-ho's lips. Kim Chiol was a rank even among high-ranked hunters. He was a talent that must be held onto. Ju Seong-chan managed to calm the boss man down and narrowed his eyes at On Song-min, clearly in derision. From what I heard just now, a ranky hunter who might have gone through a reawakening process, was it? You were saying something about that. Ju Seong-chan snorted dismissively. My Hunter Kim Chiol should prove to be more effective than someone like that, a hunter with no proven qualities. On Song-min's expression hardened. He was being looked down on here. However, he didn't raise his voice and let anger take over him. Let's just wait and see who's correct at the end of the day. The four men shifted their gazes at the same time over to the red gate that had trapped their hunters. I'm guessing you're not a ranky, am I right? The female hunter asked Jin Woo quite openly. Jin Woo opened his mouth in response. Well, then, let me ask you something as well. Of course. Jin Woo shifted his gaze over to Kim Chiol and the hunters gathering around him. They were busy planning their next move before they got going. You guys, you're supposed to be new recruits, yet how can you be this calm? The first thing we've been taught is that anything can happen inside a dungeon, you see. Anything could happen inside a dungeon, she said. Jin Woo knew this fact better than anyone here, actually. Every one of us has been trained properly, especially that Kim Chiol over there. He even received a special training regime, too. He's scheduled to join up with the White Tiger's main combat force. They didn't fear dungeons, because they had received prior training. Knowing something and experiencing it are two different things. More so, when your fragile belief of you knowing everything about dungeons develops just a tiny little crack, it'd all come crashing down like a dam with a hole getting swept away by the deluge of water. Building up one's confidence took a long time, but breaking it down only took a single moment. He could see the fate in store for Kim Chiol's team already. My question, you haven't answered it yet. The question about whether he was a ranky or not. She seemed to be a rather tenacious customer, this woman. Why should I tell you that? He replied in a blunt and a bit curt manner, but the female hunter, Park Hye-jin, was now crying out in elation and clenched her fists. Inwardly, of course, Park Hye-jin had met many people in her life and she immediately knew what Jin Woo's response meant, and that would be his unbridled confidence. Jin Woo's eyes and Kim Chiol's met. We will. Kim Chiol's voice was harsh, low. Didn't matter what he was trying to convey here. He sounded threatening and menacing. Be using the road. He didn't saunter over here just to declare which path they would be using, though. No, Kim Cheol's eyes were asking what Jin Woo's group would do, along with the hidden threat of "Don't you dare follow us." Jin Woo scanned his surroundings once more, before reverting his gaze back to Kim Cheol. "And we will be going through the forest. I'll wish you luck." "Well, you guys will be the ones needing that luck later on, though." Jin Woo didn't mouth his inner thoughts, however. "What a bunch of idiots. Excuse me, look over there." Kim Cheol uncrossed his arms and pointed towards some trees. Not just one or two, either. Everywhere he pointed at, trees bore the scars that suspiciously looked like claw marks of potentially gigantic creatures. "That isn't that. It's a bear. An ice bear. A bear-type monster, infamous among all the beast-type monsters as the most ferocious. Those claw marks were them marking their territory." The hunters in Kim Cheol's group saw those and clicked their tongues. Tisk, tisk. It had been better if they stayed put here and waited till the end. Looks like innocent people will die because of a Ranky taking the lead. I mean, would that Ranky have received any prior training like us? Kim Cheol stared at the forest and chuckled derisively. That's to be expected from a measly Ranky. Wait, suddenly, Kim Cheol's smile disappeared. Most of that group is rank CS, and there is a rank B among them too, so how come? How come he thought Jin Woo was that group's leader? Indeed, he hadn't felt that anything was amiss, right up until he realized this weird incongruency by himself. Still, Kim Cheol shook his head. Well, it doesn't matter. They were all going to die soon, anyway. Worrying about themselves took precedence over what would happen to the weaklings who wouldn't last for long, to begin with. There was nothing he could do about the dead, but well, shouldn't the ones that were supposed to live on? Jin Woo took the lead and walked up ahead. But before long, Park Hye-jin stood in front of him. "What is it? Have you lost your mind?" Jin Woo crossed his arms and displayed how unhappy he was to hear that, meaning she'd have to be careful with her follow-up. Perhaps she understood Jin Woo's warning. Park Hye-jin's voice had softened somewhat. "I'm sorry, but I need to say this." Park Hye-jin's finger pointed towards one of the surrounding trees. "Can you see that? There was a huge claw mark on the tree's bark. Over there, too. And there. Almost every single tree had their barks greatly damaged, and it was hard to find one that was still intact. This entire place is full of the bear's territorial markings, you know. This entire forest is the bear-type monster's habitat." Park Hye-jin thought that Jin Woo would show one of the three responses: get angry, get stunned, or accept what she told him. Unfortunately for her, her expectation was wide off the mark. She was the one advising him against the irrational and hasty decision here. Yet it was Jin Woo looking at her as if she was the idiot. Why is he looking at me like that?" Park Hye-jin's face reddened up from anger. Her voice rose up again. Jin Woo spat out a long sigh and opened his mouth. "That is precisely why we're moving through the forest." "Eh?" Park Hye-jin's eyes went round in confusion. She still doesn't get it even with that massive hint. Jin Woo had little choice but to tell it straight to her. "When we're moving through the forest, we only have to worry about ice bears." Only then did Park Hye-jin understood Jin Woo's intention. The meaning behind lots of ice bears was simple, that there were no other monsters strong enough to hunt ice bears in this forest. To be more precise, the group didn't have to worry about fighting monsters stronger than ice bears here. Why haven't I thought about that? Park Hye-jin became ashamed about shouting at Jin Woo just now. Her head dropped low, even the skin of her neck reddening up from embarrassment. Jin Woo didn't know how strong these ice bears were, but he was sure of them being weaker than those two white phantom archers. They were wearing clothing that looked to be made out of bear felt. That was why he had chosen the forest route. He was thinking of traversing the forest and increasing his level, and at the same time, keep an eye out on Kim Cheol's group and the movements of the white phantoms while waiting for his chance to act. That was the safest way available. Park Hye-jin's face was far too red to be normal. She couldn't raise her head and managed to squeeze out a voice that was smaller than a buzzing mosquito. It's because. Too cold. Jin Woo spat out a long groan and summoned his store. He quickly browsed through the items for sale and spotted thick fur coats and shoes designed for winter. Fur coat and the shoes cost 10 gold each. Unlike items with added effects, regular items didn't cost a lot to buy. No, compared to the amount of gold in his possession, they were oh so cheap. Still, I'd never have guessed that I have to buy Japtum with my gold. Jin Woo chose buy for all of them. Since he couldn't just give to some and ignore others, Jin Woo spent 100 gold and bought the articles of clothing for all 5 people. 5 coats and 5 pairs of boots suddenly popped up in front of his eyes. And of course, the eyes of all 4 people, excluding Jin Woo, all grew super wide. Was that separate space magic? Park Hye-jin was taken aback, too. and she hurriedly raised her head to look at Jin Woo. Not caring whether they were shocked or not, Jin Woo spoke to them disinterestedly. "Put them on." He finished speaking and reached down to grab the closest fur coat. But then, Han Song-yi suddenly grasped his sleeve. "Just what's going on with you? You managed to catch that arrow, and now you use some strange magic to take these clothes out, too." Frowns formed on the forehead of Jin Woo. It didn't take a genius to figure out that, at this rate, he'd be swarmed by the endless streams of questions and get irritated to no end. "Right, let's use this chance to clearly draw the line." Jin Woo raised his voice and spoke in a firm voice. "Han Song-yi, I brought you here with me, so I will take full responsibility and protect you." However, Jin Woo's voice became colder next. "Don't ask me about anything." Jin Woo then swept his gaze against Park Hye-jin as well as other hunters tagging along. "The same goes for the rest of you. Do not ask me anything, and do not demand anything from me." He didn't stop there, though. "If you don't like it, then you can just leave now. I won't stop you." There was one more thing, one more reason why Jin Woo chose the forest route. Status window. Jin Woo silently summoned his status window and swapped his current title from the one who overcame the adversity to that of the slaughterer of wolves, a title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. A chance to abuse this plainly cheating buff had fallen on his laps. So why should he go anywhere else now? It was then. The hunters all began screaming out loudly. It's the bear. It's the ice bear. An ice bear that had picked up on the scents of humans was slowly trudging towards the group. These humans were its enemies that had invaded its territory. Obviously, it did not look too kindly towards the intruders. The creature did resemble a polar bear, but it was almost twice the size. And the magic crystal, the symbol of all monsters, could be seen in the middle of its chest area as if it was some kind of a proud emblem. Roar. It roared out furiously, the ground seemingly quaking under its might. All the hunters, excluding Jin Woo, all froze stiff on the spot after hearing the ice bear's roar. Park Hye-jin's expression crumpled unsightly. "Oh, so we only need to be mindful of ice bears, was it? How could anyone say that sort of nonsense after seeing that monster?" She almost fell for Seong Jin Woo's pretty convincing argument. But, upon seeing an ice bear, she was certain of one thing. We definitely shouldn't have chosen the forest route. Sensing the approaching danger to the group, Park Hye-jin stepped out in front of the group and shouted out, "I'll draw its attention towards me, so everyone must." The scruff of Park Hye-jin's neck was yanked back by a considerable force, and she had to backstep several times to make sure that she didn't end up on her butt. After somehow regaining her balance, she raised her head only to find Jin Woo standing before her. "Hey, what was that all about? I'm telling you this right now. I'll be killing all the monsters from now on." Obviously, he couldn't let anyone steal his experience points, now could he? For Jin Woo, these bears were perfect health tonics to buff him up for his inevitable showdown with the true enemies of this place, the White Phantoms. Park Hye-jin couldn't hide her astonishment. "No matter how strong you think you are, that thing is a monster of a high-rank dungeon." Completely ignoring Park Hye-jin's furious voice coming from behind him, Jin Woo walked right towards the ice bear. Well, it's not going to be okay to use daggers for this one. The blood splatter would make a mess of things, wouldn't it? Jin Woo had already summoned his 2 daggers almost out of reflex, but stored them back in his inventory. Instead, he clenched his fists tightly. "Well, I promised to just observe, but this is an emergency, so I'm sure they'll understand." "Right." Jin Woo's glare collided mid-air with the ice bear's roar. Jin Woo was already above the ice bear's head. It was here that he kind of understood the reason for this monster's infamy. Even then, he also sensed that all his level-ups until now weren't in vain. Before the ice bear could lift its head up, Jin Woo punched with all his might right in the middle of the monster's forehead. Kaboom! The head of the ice bear slammed down on the snowy ground with an explosive force. Its skull was completely obliterated. With its limp tongue hanging outside the slack maw, the ice bear stopped moving completely. Hell yeah! He was thinking that his level up was just around the corner, and now, he was glad to have stopped Park Hye-jin from taking any action. You, just what are you?" Jin Woo heard that trembling voice and looked behind him, only to spot 4 speechless faces staring back at him. Jin Woo sheepishly scratched the side of his head. "I warned them earlier because I didn't want to run into this sort of situation." It seemed that a person would become rather forgetful whenever he or she witnessed something utterly beyond their capacity to understand. Left with little choice, Jin Woo had to state his position once more. "I told you, I'll not tolerate anyone asking me questions. If you're unhappy with my methods, then..." Jin Woo pointed his finger in the direction of Kim Cheol's team. With a complicated expression, Baek Yun-ho recalled his experiences. Once you cross the gate, the place you end up could be a desert with temperatures soaring past 60 degrees Celsius. Or it could be a dense jungle full of poisonous insects and snakes. Or it could be the middle of a snow-covered field where it's so cold that you'd immediately develop frostbites. Even when you're in such a perilous situation, you still have to fight monsters as well. Let's say that you've somehow adapted to your new environments. From then on, you will have to procure food. Indeed, one would have to secure enough food to last a few weeks at a minimum, or at worst, for several months. In Baek Yun-ho's mind, the hunters ranked C and below were already as good as dead by now. Evening. Large chunks of meat were nicely sizzling on top of a campfire. You know, this bear meat, it's a bit chewy but not as bad as I thought. Would you like some more? Thank you kindly. Do Myung H1 expertly sliced the meat of the ice bear and placed them on a plate pushed forward by Yun Kai-jun. These two men were the rank C hunters following Jin Woo. Both Park Hye-jin and Han Song-yi were also slowly chewing on the bear meat, although their portions weren't as large as the men's. Please pass me the pepper. What about salt? The seasoning's just about fine, so it's okay. They all look to, more or less, have adapted to the living conditions of the dungeon. Don't you think the attacks of the ice bears have lessened lately? Park Hye-jin replied to that question. Well, that's because the team leader has annihilated their numbers, that's why. That man, it's like he has some sort of unresolved vendetta against these bears from his previous life or something. His eyes go all crazy when he spots an ice bear. He's so scary whenever he does that. Really, really scary. Now that I think about it, where did the team leader disappear to? Yun Kai-jun had his head almost buried in the plate as he chomped down on the meat, but still raised his head to make his reply. He went out a little while ago, saying that he's going to take a look around here. Huh? Park Hye-jin formed a helpless expression, roaming inside a high-ranked dungeon all alone. Isn't he scared at all? Yun Kai-jun formed a sly grin. If it's him, it's not going to be a problem. Jin Woo searched through the forest and made his exit as he brushed past some thickets. It must be somewhere nearby. Found you. Just a quick head count and he found over 30 bears. In other words, this was literally a bear farm. The corners of Jin Woo's lips arched up. He deliberately came here alone to eliminate the possibility of eyewitnesses. This would be the perfect opportunity to utilize his shadow soldiers. Indeed, he had been waiting for a moment like this. Come out. When he inwardly called out, the soldiers wearing black armor soundlessly materialized and surrounded him. You all understand that this is your first sortie, right? What he meant by that was, just as one's impression was decided upon through the first encounter, these guys would have to impress him with their first battle, too. The shadow soldiers stood at attention in eerie silence, with nary a hint of disorder. Nice. Jin Woo smirked deeply, seeing them like that. Meanwhile, more and more ice bears began emerging from the caves after detecting Jin Woo's scent. Looks like the other side is done preparing, too. Jin Woo pointed at the ice bears. Go. As soon as his order was issued, the shadow soldiers rushed forward as if they were sliding on ice. The shadow soldiers rapidly closed in on their targets. Unfortunately, the angry swipes of the ice bear's front paws were faster than their movements. A single hit, and one shadow soldier was obliterated. If it wasn't a shadow underneath the armors but an actual human being, that attack would surely have ripped him apart into several pieces. Jin Woo frowned deeply. As I thought, did I ask for too much? Whether it was their physical strength or their body sizes, these ice bears were difficult enemies for the shadow soldiers to fight against. However, something quite surprising happened next. Jin Woo's eyes opened wider. The soldier with its chest torn open by the ice bear's attack suddenly transformed into a clump of black smoke just before it fell to the ground. The black smoke coagulated in a spot a couple of steps away, and it reverted back to its original appearance. And so, as the infantrymen bought time out in front, the magic soldiers standing at the back had completed their spells. Boom. The balls of flames leaving the ends of the magic soldiers' hands exploded here, there, and everywhere. The shadow soldiers swept up and the explosions regenerated right away. But on the other hand, the ice bears could only roll around screaming in sheer pain and agony as their bodies caught on fire. Meanwhile, the shadow soldiers didn't waste time and swiftly approached the defenseless bears before stabbing down on them with their blades. Jin Woo continued to spectate on the proceedings with an expression filled with great interest and happiness. The infantrymen and their quick regenerative abilities, the magic soldiers and their superb firepower. The overall combat prowess of the shadow soldiers had far exceeded his initial expectations. Soon, the ice bears were forced into retreat by the might of the shadow soldiers and were pushed back towards the entrance of the caves. accompanied by the eardrum-shaking roar. A huge shadow slowly emerged from one of the caves. Isn't that? Even Jin Woo's eyes grew extra round and super large. The bear that came out was at least a head taller and double the body size compared to others around it. Just a single swipe from this huge bear, and multiple soldiers were blown away. The regeneration rate of the soldiers could not keep up with the huge ice bear's relentless attacks. Jin Woo could only leak out a groan after seeing that. So, it's the leader of the pack, is it? He kind of suspected that, since there was a pack, there should be a leader leading it, too. Once his MP had been drained, the obliterated shadow soldiers didn't regenerate and simply entered back into Jin Woo's shadow. In other words, in order to regenerate the lost soldiers, he needed lots more mana. With the appearance of the Ice Bear leader, the flow of the battle had reversed completely. However, Jin Woo still had plenty of leeway. Since their boss has shown up, this side should also step up. Jin Woo summoned the boss of the shadow soldiers, Ygritte. One more shadow escaped from Jin Woo's shadow, and from that shadow, a knight wearing a helm with decorative mane rose up soundlessly. Jin Woo pointed forward with his chin. Ygritte bowed to Jin Woo before rushing towards the Ice Bear leader. Ygritte unsheathed his longsword and deftly evaded the bear's enraged attacks, all the while shaving away at the giant monster's body with his blade. Tendons, claws, front paw, legs, torso, bits and chunks of meat from various areas of the monster sheared off and fell to the ground piece by piece. Jin Woo could only gasp out in admiration at Ygritte's crafty and elaborate movements. The last place Ygritte hit was the bear's head. Slice. The giant ice bear's head separated from its body and flew away. Before it landed on the ground, though, Ygritte easily snatched it. He trod proudly towards Jin Woo and knelt before him. And then, he placed the dead bear's head before Jin Woo's feet. It was as if the knight was presenting the spoils of victory to his sovereign. Jin Woo swallowed dry saliva and gazed at the kneeling Ygritte and his bowed head. If Ygritte decided to use his sword from the beginning, would I have been able to defeat him? The Ice Bears, without their leader present, lost all semblance of order and became utterly confused, before they were cleanly swept away by the remaining shadow soldiers. That brought about the end to the battles. The result was truly satisfying. The levels of the soldiers had risen up nicely. Also, as these shadow soldiers were seen as a part of his skill, even Jin Woo's level had risen up by 3. Most of all, there was another point he found much to his liking. Rise up. And that point would be the fact that he could recruit new friends now, from the shadows of several ice bears that Jin Woo had selected, which obviously included the boss bear. Black shapes began to slowly rise up. These creatures came with the name tag that said Shadow Beast Soldier. At a casual glance, they kind of resembled bears, but it was still difficult to tell whether these